I would like to call the meeting to order. This is the Oregon City Commission for Wednesday, April the 1st. Good evening. I'm Alice Norris, the mayor.
Good evening, Daphne West, Commission President.
Doug Nealey, Commissioner.
Rocky Smith, Commissioner.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As you know, this is Oregon's 150th birthday, and being the first city of the American West, we have a local celebration as well, and this is your meeting, your sesquicentennial moment, where we bring you rare and interesting tidbits from the history of Oregon City. This is from the Oregon City Woolen Mills. You only have a short time to secure your free Indian blanket that regularly sells for $7.50. This is a woolen blanket from the Oregon City Woolen Mills, and hundreds of people have taken advantage of our vacation gift offer. It's a beautiful Indian blanket, just the thing for motoring, picnics, boating, or the summer cottage. Free with every suit, overcoat, or women's coat. Get yours now, only a few more days. Jacobs Oregon City clothes are nationally known, worn by well-dressed men everywhere. Pure virgin wool fabrics woven in our own mill, tailored in our own shops, smart styles and exclusive patterns. Popularly priced because we make everything from fabric to finished garment. You must see the lovely new fall coats for women, deftly tailored from virgin wool fabric in grays, browns, and blues. Latest patterns. 2 trouser suits, $30, $25, and $40. Top coats and overcoats, $22.50 to $45. Women coats, $19.75 and up. That's $19.75. And you can get all this at the Oregon City Woolen Mills, Oregon City's finest retail store. Thus ends your sesquicentennial moment. Next, we have a presentation, which is a follow-up to one we had previously, from Ann Kraft, who is going to talk about the youth alcohol access in our community and others. Welcome, Ann.
You're special.
I know.
You got them all.
Good. Well, thank you for the opportunity to address the commission, and I'm here to talk about the Reducing Youth Access to Alcohol project that's been happening in Oregon City, and I've asked Chief Conrad to join me, and he's going to share some of the enforcement activities that have been happening on behalf of the project.
Would you mind pulling that microphone just a little closer to
at all.
you? Great.
Okay.
Thank
good.
you.
Certainly. Okay. Forward. Yep, okay. So just to give you a little bit of history about the project, this is a federally funded project through National Institute for Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. There have been 36 communities across the state of Oregon that were randomly selected to participate in the project. 18 of those communities have been receiving this intervention, and the other 18 have been comparison or control communities. And so Oregon City has been receiving the intervention. And there are 5 different activities that we're looking at, that we're evaluating. And these are activities that have been recommended as best practice from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and the Institute of Medicine, but they've not been rigorously evaluated. So this project is really the first of its kind that's evaluating the combined effectiveness of these activities. So the activities are focusing on ways to reduce both commercial and social access to alcohol by underage youth. And the first activity is reward and reminder. And this looks at, we've been focusing on the off-premise alcohol outlets in Oregon City. And trained 21-year-old volunteers have gone into these businesses, attempted to purchase alcohol without having ID on them, and have rewarded employees who say, sorry, can't sell to you without seeing proof of age. And they have reminded employees who have gone ahead and made the sale without verifying proof of legal age. And we've been doing this activity, we did it last spring, 2 different rounds, and we just finished up the second year, again 2 different rounds. The idea is to positively reinforce employees who ask for ID before making a sale to anyone that looks even like remotely possibly under 21. Okay, so here are the results from all 4 rounds of visits that we've made to these off-premise outlets. And I should back up. The off-premise outlets are typically the mini marts, the grocery stores, like the gas stations, where one would purchase alcohol and take it off premise to consume. That's where the name comes from. So we have had, so you can see that on the vertical axis is the percent of rewards. So that is the percent of stores that were visited who had employees who said, sorry, can't sell to you without seeing ID. And then the different sections horizontally are, the first 2 are in the first year, both rounds, and then the last 2 going left to right are the second year, both rounds. And so as you can see, in the first year, the first round, we visited 28 outlets and we had 10 sales. In that second round in the first year, we visited 26 outlets and had 9 sales. So about a similar consistent reward rate. And then in the second year, in the first round, we visited 26 outlets and had 7 sales. And sales meaning a reminder was given. And then in the last round, which was just several weeks ago here, we visited 27 outlets and only had 4 sales, and that was really encouraging. And there are probably many different conclusions to draw here, but I choose to believe that it's consistently positively reinforcing clerks who are asking for ID and that the ease of obtaining alcohol this way has been decreasing by way of these visits. Feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. These are just, this is an example of an employee who received a reward, and she works at Danielson's. On either side of her are the 21-year-old volunteers. And this is an example of a visit at a Plaid Pantry here, and also the volunteers. So we're looking for folks that are fresh-faced. Okay. Another one of the activities that we've looked at is compliance checks. So the flow of the project is to start out by positively reinforcing these businesses to follow the law, and then we have OLCC and Oregon City Police Department partnered and came in and did compliance checks here. And I'm sure that you're aware, but this is the use of an 18-year-old decoy. He or she has their ID, and they go in same to these businesses and try to purchase alcohol. And the OLCC agent then comes back. Is that right?
Yes.
And issues a citation?
Yes.
Okay. And then the police department is also partnering in that way. Do you want to add anything?
Well, the police department will coordinate with OLCC and the minor decoys to go into specific businesses. If there is a sale to the minors, then OLCC and the police department work together, issuing the citations and enforcing some type of sanction against the outlet that sold the alcohol.
Commissioner West has a question.
So these are underage people using real IDs, or they're underage people using fake IDs?
Using real IDs.
And it's been interesting.
Hoping they aren't going to get checked.
Correct.
And interestingly, in other communities that we've been working in, frequently the store clerk does check the ID, or looks at it rather, and then continues to make the sale. And so some businesses have implemented ID checking equipment and training, and it's interesting that even with the decoy having his or her own ID showing that he or she is still a minor, there's still a sale being made.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so just a couple months ago in February, the police department here and OLCC conducted one of these checks, and they checked 20 of the off-premise outlets here, and only 3 sales were made. So this is an 85% success rate, and that's actually quite a bit higher than about 75 or 77% that's average for the state. So that's a real success. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Conrad, but before he speaks, I want to just compliment the police department. Again, there have been 18 different communities that have participated in this project, and we've gotten a varying response from departments, and Chief Conrad may already be saying this, but they the department burned through, utilized all of the funds associated with this project, and so we gave them another additional funds because they've been conducting activities, and it's very clear to me that it's through the support of leadership in the departments that makes this successful, and so I really uphold Oregon City as an example of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Neely.
A couple of questions. I presume you've done the analysis on the 18, both sets of 18, the 18 controls and so forth. Has that been completed?
There have been some preliminary analysis,
Okay.
But the project is still continuing.
Okay,
we'll
so
do
you
that
haven't
final-
completed the analysis
Correct,
yet?
right.
Okay. I was just wondering if you saw changes in the controls or not.
There is, and I have a slide that I'll follow up with.
Oh, okay.
And I'll talk a little bit about that.
Excellent.
Yep, great.
Okay, Chief.
Well, this program, as Ann said, has actually been going on since May of last year. So it started under Chief Hurist and was very successful. At the time, we were awarded $15,000 in funding to work these different types of overtime shifts to reduce the access to alcohol. And after that, we did go through it so fast, they awarded us another $7,500. And we're hoping if the funding continues, we can continue this program in the future. And we're waiting to hear back whether or not there's going to be additional funding available. But as we got into this, I started thinking about different community strategies that we have to use to combat youth abuse of alcohol. And I think the first one really is what this is. It's RIE, it's reducing youth access to alcohol. And it seems fairly simplistic, but if we can stop kids from getting a hold of alcohol, we stop a lot of the issues that are associated with it. And some interesting statistics when I was looking at this that I'll share with you. But by the time they reach 8th grade, about 50% of adolescents have had at least one drink, and about 20% report being drunk. Approximately 20% of 8th graders and 50% of 12th graders have had a drink within the last 30 days. Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death among youths from 15 to 20, and the rate of fatal crashes among alcohol-involved drivers between 16 and 20 is more than twice the rate for alcohol-related driving 21 and older. And this is one that really got to me when I heard this. But underage alcohol use is more likely to cause a death than all illegal drugs combined. So when people talk about it's just a rite of passage, kids will be kids, we have to realize that abuse and access to alcohol is killing our children more than all other illegal drug use combined. And that's pretty sobering, no pun intended, but it's very, very sobering. So there's also a higher risk of sexual assault and engaging in high-risk sex. Adolescents are more vulnerable to alcohol-related brain damage, which contribute to problems later at work and in school. And people who begin drinking at age 18 or before are 4 times more likely to develop alcohol dependency problems later on in life. So as you can see, this is a project near and dear to the police department. We've had some pretty amazing statistics in trying to reduce youth access to alcohol, and I'll share a few of those with you. We had 13 underage party dispersals. At those dispersals, we issued 57 MIP warnings, MIP citations and 59 warnings. We had 44 underage alcohol violations, and those type of violations can include furnishing, minor possession by consumption, and different issues like that. We had 3 underage DUI arrests. We made over 2,700 contacts at 9 different dances, games, and functions, and did 51 recreational foot patrols, and those are basically areas in which we know that young people congregate and walk through there trying to disperse any type of alcohol-related issues. We did 5 traffic emphases in which we stopped 181 cars. We gave 143 verbal warnings and 78 citations. And typically when we would stop a car, we would tell, whether it was a parent or a child, we would tell them that we are working a grant to reduce youth access to alcohol and let them know that we were out there in the community cracking down on this type of thing. And by the end of it, I was hearing from our officers that kids at parties and other places were acknowledging that they knew the police were cracking down, they were coming to those parties because of the enforcement we were making, the contacts we were making out there. So I think the officers did a really, really good job of getting that word out, and I hope that we can continue to work together in the future to keep this project going.
It's one of our key project objectives is creating a perception of increased enforcement. You know, whether or not those citations and operations are actually happening, we really want young people to perceive that there's an increased enforcement effort. Just very quickly, another project activity is disseminating media. So we've disseminated several pieces to the local newspaper talking about underage drinking as well as the project activities. And then here is the preliminary data that I just referred to. Part of our evaluation of this project is having 21-year-olds go into these same alcohol outlets that we're focused on doing the intervention with. They're going in without their ID, they're trying to buy alcohol, and they are collecting data simply about whether or not they were able to buy, the gender of the employee, the approximate age, what kind of signs were displayed. They're not having an interaction with the employee, they're just gathering data. And this data is, the results of this data is illustrated here. So on the vertical axis, this is the percent of sales, 0% to 50%. So the percent that these decoys were able to buy alcohol. And along the horizontal axis is the various years that this data was collected. And the different colored lines are illustrating the 3 different groups of communities that we've been working in, and the blue line is the control communities. So as you can see, when this project first started, the sales rate was, just under 30%, all the way up to just under 40% for the majority of these communities.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's shocking, that young people are able to buy alcohol without showing ID at that rate. And as you can see, as the project has spanned across several years, there's been a sharp decrease in sales. Interestingly, there's been a sharp decrease in sales in the control communities as well. And that's great news for our state, and that's not so great news for our project. But overall, I think that the state of Oregon is doing good work in regards to reducing youth access to alcohol. So that's what we know right now. And then in regards to the next steps, the community-based piece, so the media and the reward and reminder visits to the businesses have concluded. Oregon City Police Department will continue on at least through May, and we're really keeping our fingers crossed that the project will access dollars to continue the contract for at least another year. And then a final report with the summary of all the data and the analyses will be submitted to communities at the end of the project. So it will either be in late 2009 or 2010.
I was reading in the paper this morning that alcohol on off-premise locations, the sales were down due to the economy.
Oh,
And-
interesting.
No, I got that wrong. I guess it was restaurant sales that were down. People were taking it home to drink. So,
Oh, okay, right.
so were you looking at the at sales in the general public as well? to determine whether the economy is affecting the youth's ability to buy.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. The only general public kind of purchasing ability that we're measuring is in the control communities, and so that
Okay,
we're
yeah,
hoping
right.
that they'll represent the general population. But that will be interesting to see how this economic shift is affecting the sales rates even. Yeah.
Commissioner Neely.
Yeah, I was wondering, you were mentioning the number of stores that were visited each
Yes.
time.
Right.
Were you going to many of the same stores?
Yes, they were all the same stores.
You were increasing the number a little bit as you were going on.
Yeah,
but-
they varied a little bit sometimes because a store was closed at the time
Oh, I
of
see.
our visit. The volunteers are instructed to not try to attempt to buy if they know somebody in the store. The
Did
clerk.
they know, that after the first time you came, were they indicated that you'd be visiting again or not?
We did merchant education to each of these businesses at the initiation of the project, and they were told that throughout the next 2 years these
Uh-huh.
visits would be happening. Yeah.
The other thing, I mean, it was nice to see that 3 out of 17 was down there. I imagine kids figure out who they can buy their liquor from, and even though you reduce it, the word will probably get around, and that store might end up doing a bit more business in the process.
Right. Yeah, we were concerned about that in a way we would be training young people to go in and try to buy. And what we did was we used volunteers that were from outside of the community to achieve a piece of that. We wanted them to be anonymous, but we also wanted they also signed agreements to keep this information confidential. But kids are very savvy, and they do know.
Commissioner Smith.
This topic has just triggered a nerve for me as I sit up here, and I wanted to comment and really thank you both for the work that you're doing. I lost a former student, beautiful, young, intelligent student who graduated a few years back over spring break. She was killed in a DUI accident. And I haven't come to terms with that in the last couple of days quite yet. This is a huge problem, and I just wanted to thank you so much because I can see the effects that this project is having at the school level through dances and football games. I'm seeing all these things happening at the prom, at the skateboard competition in May. This is helping, and it is so important. And I can see it every day. I see the negative parts of it every day too. But I know that it's making a difference, and I just thank you so much for it. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Commissioner West.
Yeah, I too would like to share a little story, and it's timely that you were speaking this weekend because of the tragedy that happened out on Redland Road this past weekend with the former, my children's former friends from Oregon City swim team in high school, and alcohol's involved. Now, they weren't minors, but we never can stress that these things happen.
So,
Thank you for your report and
Thank you.
continue doing good work. It sounds like it's effective.
thank you. Thanks.
Next, we'll move on to citizen comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to speak to us up to 3 minutes on items that are not listed on the agenda. First, David Morgan, followed by Paul Edgar. And we ask when you come up that you would say your name and the city in which you live. As long as you've written carefully, you don't need to give us your address.
My name is David Morgan, and I've been living in Oregon City for 5 years. When I moved here 5 years ago, my wife and I found this beautiful home that we thought we could fix up and finish another 15, 20 years working and retiring. And we spent $25,000 fixing up the backyard, fixing up the new fence and all that stuff that had to be done. And now we can't enjoy it because there is so much noise in the backyard because we live behind a strip mall that has a bar behind it. So I have this parking lot behind me that goes to a bar, and it's not bad enough that they go until 2:30 in the morning. By 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, I have delivery trucks coming up to the auto parts store next to it. I mean, we need a break. We should not be expected to go on an hour and a half of sleep every night. So, and I called the Oregon City Police, I called the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department, I called the City Hall, I called the OLCC, and they all said you need to talk to your city commissioners. So that's why I'm here today. What can be done to fix this?
You want to respond to that, or talk with him? Yeah, we'll do that. Okay.
I've got,
We have his address here, so.
yeah, I've got my email from the OLCC telling me that effects of noise pollution, the Oregon legislature, because you don't have a noise control policy in place, United States Department of Labor, 2 or 3 of their things, National Institute of Occupational Safety. I mean, something has to get, and it's only gotten worse this last year because they can't smoke inside the bars, so everybody goes outside. And the OLCC said that's probably where the problem is.
Yeah.
And the parking lot is behind, right next to my fence.
Okay.
So something has to give.
Okay.
This is the first time in 5 years my wife said maybe we should consider moving. And we were both born here in Oregon City.
Okay, if you would stop, make sure that we need to get your address
Okay.
more clearly, and then
Sure.
we'll be able to
Yeah,
let you
something.
communicate with staff, and he'll give us a report.
Okay.
Commissioner Neely?
When you're looking at that, could you, I know some communities, I don't know, he indicated that we don't have a noise ordinance. I know some communities, well, Portland, for example, they have a decibel
Yes.
requirement at a property's edge, and that might be a mechanism, and whether they do it for different hours, too. I mean, what the possibilities
Some
are.
have decibel levels, some have quiet hours. There's, before we moved up here, they had quiet hours in the last location we were at, although that did not apply to commercial and industrial zones.
Right, it's just residential.
It was just yeah, so your neighbor could get a ticket for the same thing that the guy next to him that's in commercial doesn't.
Okay,
So
thank you
it's-
very much for bringing
It's something
this.
that has to be brought to attention.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Edgar, followed by William Gifford.
Thank you. Paul Edgar, Kanema. I'm actually coming before you because of the Kanema Neighborhood Association, representing them as a land use chair. Last City Commission meeting, we came prepared with authorization. Even the Kanema Neighborhood Association chair was with me to testify, and on the transportation side of the appeal, ODOT appeal. And then a decision was made to circumvent any public testimony with the agreement. I contacted some of my friends of the Federal Highway Administration and asked them about the jurisdictional oversight and who is responsible for approving access agreements associated with a federal highway interchange. And my friends tell me that they defer that responsibility directly to ODOT, and they therefore are statutorily responsible to enforce federal rules at the intersection. When these rules are being violated, and in this case, access is potentially being violated, and ODOT knowingly said, we can't enter into an agreement that will allow you to have access to Agnes from Washington. What they are doing in saying, well, we'll just leave this out in the open, but we'll let you build the street. and we'll put a type of an abutment there so that it can be moved. But in reality, this is an appealable decision that is in violation of federal understandings, as was told to me by a person from the Federal Highway Administration. I never felt like that you guys would be going down this path, or even ODOT would be going down this path, because I believe they know that, I know that, and now my friends in the federal government know that. And we're just sitting here watching. But I believe that you have something that's going to be going before you, and I'm not going to be in a position to testify. So I'm taking this opportunity to let you know that there's a whole lot of people that are going to be looking over everyone's shoulder. And in fact, we may be even appealing this to LUBA and getting it out all into the open. And it is important, because when we violate or we knowingly take positions that are in violations of code or statutory responsibilities, and in effect what is being asked to be done, it's just trying to skate around it. And it's trying, in the skating around it, it's not necessarily smart skating around it.
Please summarize, Paul.
Okay?
Because your time is up.
Doesn't a neighborhood association have a little bit more time? But anyway, all I can turn around and tell you is that a lot of people are going to be looking over your shoulders. People know at higher levels, over and above the local ODOT supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. William Gifford?
Well, I can't, those comments get made, and what the notion that we might be violating the law, I'm going to always turn to our attorney and ask him to respond to it.
I'll respond when it comes up to the agreement itself.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we'll be
I
discussing.
would caution you that these are remarks that are outside the record and outside the proceedings. I'll take care of the declaration of ex parte contact, and we'll deal with it.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. And I'm speaking to you just as a citizen. I've heard recently that our brilliant manager of the Pioneer Center, Kathy Wiseman, is considering using part of the grounds of the Pioneer Center as a garden, as a community garden, to raise food for hungry people. And I just want to say I think that's a really swell idea. And I would hope that if any of your judgment is required for that, I would certainly hope that you would support that type of an activity, because I think it would be good for the community. That's all I want to say.
I'm so supportive of that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I assume she won't be using the peace garden.
Should we raise the peas?
A peace garden, okay.
Yep, and we'd have world peace. Okay, that's all of the citizen comments that I have for this evening. Are there any others who've come and whose card I did not receive? Do you have one, Amber? Oh. We do have one more. Sorry, I didn't receive it. Amber from the Chamber. Amber Holbeck.
Hi.
Hi, Amber.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and our City Commissioners. I am Amber Holbeck. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon City Chamber, and I do live just outside of Oregon City. And this evening I wanted to share to not only you, but all of the folks at home that might end up watching this, that the Chamber is so pleased to serve as the host for the ribbon cutting of our own U.S. Representative, Kurt Schrader's district office. It will be officially celebrated on Tuesday, April 14th at 112 8th Street in downtown Oregon City. The event is from 5 to 6:30, and the official ceremony begins at 5:30. So please be sure to put that on your schedules and join us for that event and celebrating what that will be doing for our local citizens. Now, the piece that our commissioners have and some other city staff have is a copy, essentially, of an email that I received recently from our chamber website. It is from a gentleman and his family that decided to come to Oregon City. I'd like to read it to you. Dear Mrs. Holbeck, just this past week, I decided to take my family to Oregon City to fish. I wanted to have a spring break as a family and see what Oregon City had to offer. I rented a hotel room, ate in your city's restaurants, and used the boat launch. I probably spent about $600 in your fair city, but found that the people of Oregon City were consistently rude. The people fishing at the wall yelled at boaters and attempt to hit boats with lead sinkers by use of their poles. Being retired from the U.S. Army, I hold myself and my children to a level of respect that reflects positively. I will not be returning to Oregon City, and I know that $600 is not much in a city's revenue, but compounded by others like myself and their experiences with the people of Oregon City, the sums could be a mass amount. Some kind of enforcement is needed, especially at the wall. This is very disconcerting to me from the chamber. It's an area that I think that the city, that a number of us need to consider some options. What are some options that we can do? I know that there are fine people in our city who care deeply about the experience of visitors and people who come here for a variety of experiences. And so I would just urge this commission, and I know that the chamber would be happy to be a part in looking into this and seeing what we can do to make sure that the river experience for all of our visitors is a positive one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could pose the question maybe
Commissioner Neely?
to the chief, if I might. And the question I pose is this. I know oftentimes with recreation going down at the rivers, we have alcohol problems down there. Do we run in that with some of the fishermen too?
I can't recall off the top of my head having any issues with that lately. I can check into it and get back to you.
Yeah.
But this is the first I've heard of this incident, and typically I would want people who are experiencing this type of thing to give the police department a call so we can respond down there and take care of it.
Yeah.
We have had some other issues along the wall with people who park on that side trying to walk into downtown, and we've had some issues on our dock with individuals.
Commissioner Nocita.
I just want to pass along that Lloyd Purdy and I got together for coffee the other day as part of his program of meeting folks and walking through downtown, and he actually mentioned that specific problem as well. So it seems to be a fairly frequent and well-known in the area, downtown.
Fishing is a vicious sport, I learned. By being out on a boat, being on a boat, ever tried to take someone else's place in a hog line, you don't do it. I was approached by...
There's federal laws against doing something with the sea lions, so they pick on the boaters instead.
Yeah, exactly. I was approached at a Metro meeting by a member of the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Department, who is part of a nonprofit whose name I forget. But they're looking into building into trying to talk to the city about extending a walkway down by the courthouse, where the work comes down to the river, particularly to get the fishermen off the wall, partly for the safety of the fish and for the people below, and because they've heard of problems as well. So it appears to be an issue that's well documented. So thank you. Any others then that we've missed? Thank you. We'll move on then. The adoption of the agenda. I would like to take under general business items C and D together because they're both about the Molalla Avenue Beaver Creek Road intersections.
C and E.
C and E.
Okay.
And then I would like to take the minutes separately because I would like to add some words to that. If that's okay with you. I'll be quick. Any other others of you who would request changes of the order? Okay. Let's look then at the first item, which is a public hearing. This is Resolution 9-02, the new transportation system development charge methodology, the amount with two components, and implementation schedule. We discussed this extensively at our last meeting on March 18th, and this is a continuation of that with some changes. So I'll turn it over to Nancy Krashauer for the staff report. Nancy.
Good evening, Mayor Norris and City Commission.
As Mayor Norris mentioned, we did review this extensively at your last meeting. At that meeting, we presented our preliminary recommendations for the Transportation SDC System Development Charge. At that time, we provided recommendations on the methodology to use in calculating the system development charge, the list of capital projects that will be used to, was not only used to calculate the charge, but also will be used in the future as we start spending the system development charges. And then we also recommended the amount for the charge, as well as some recommendations regarding a slight reduction of the amount for land development in our mixed-use downtown areas in our 7th Street Molalla Avenue corridor, transit corridor. And then the other thing we recommended was the implementation schedule. Throughout that public hearing, there were 3 predominant questions that we felt we needed to come back to you with responses. And those were a question from Commissioner Nocita, wondering how could new residential types such as cluster housings be addressed and treated with the new methodology. The second was Commissioner Neely brought up some questions regarding the cost estimates for 2 of our projects in the capital improvement list, one being the Beaver Creek Road project that extends out to the UGB. We had it going out to Henry C. And then one of the, in terms of the Swan Extension area, we had Holly Lane being improved all the way down to Maple Lane. And then the third, and we wanted to check on whether or not that was what we really wanted to present in our capital improvement program in terms of city funding responsibilities. Then the third one was a suggestion by Commissioner Neely that we look at a 3-phase implementation of the system development charge for new development, and also for the recommendations that we had made for existing lots and parcels that had either been approved through a previous land use approval process or limited land use process, or had actually been legally created and platted in residential areas. So what I did was, and I wanted to mention that John Ghilarducci is here. He was our consultant on the project. And John, why don't you just come up to the table in case there's questions that are addressed that you can answer. But I prepared a memo in an attempt to address the 3 concerns that the Commission had. And the first one was Commissioner Nocita's concern about using alternative calculations methodology for cluster housing units. And in consulting with DKS Associates, who was the traffic consultant for the project, they really recommended that it wouldn't be appropriate to use alternative data for cluster housing per se. What is the most reliable data that we have is more related to the number of vehicles at a particular residential unit, the number of registered drivers, and then to some extent discretionary income that the residents have, all of which are very difficult to track and become somewhat of an administrative burden, and they can change quite frequently as well. So the recommendation is to just use the single-family residential and other multifamily, and there's some townhouse PM peak traffic trip generation numbers to use in the Institute of Traffic Engineers handbook. So we will, and bottom line is there is not reliability in the data that's been collected for a particular kind of cluster housing or the square footage of the housing unit.
Yeah, and just for the record, my interest was more in the issue of the size of the house as opposed to the clustering of the housing.
Correct, and that.
But I recognize
it is the square
from the meeting
footage
that
situation that we do
Right.
not have reliable data for.
Right.
And then, in terms of Commissioner Neely's questions about the 2 projects, we had.
It's a draft amendment. I don't expect I don't need that change to occur here, because you actually indicated it's strictly an appendix, that the projects that you've got, and you have to have those projects in order to define what your SDCs are going to be, as I understand it. I don't believe that has to be changed in this particular document, but I do believe if we're not building out, if it's not all on city property, then we shouldn't list 100% cost to the city.
Well, I guess I would respectfully disagree that I think we do need to change it in the report, because that's the list that we based our actual charge on, the calculations were
formula.
done. And in kicking off this new SDC, I think it's important to have it as accurate as possible.
Okay.
So we did take out, the entire cost of the project from end to end had indeed been included. So we took out the portions of the projects, the cost for the portion of the project that's outside the UGB.
Okay, so the percentages of the city responsibility has been reduced.
The
I mean-
cost of the city's responsibility has been reduced.
Well, it was going to be built from, it was going to be built all the way from, all the way from, improved all the way from one end to the other, where the county's in between and we have both ends, then we probably won't build it unless we can do the whole thing.
We'll just see how it gets built. That's looking into it. And then the third one,
But that did change the number
yes, it did.
Yeah.
from 7,077 to 7,000.
7,000, that's right. And then the other thing that we looked at was your suggestion that we look at a three-phase implementation. And when we're increasing the existing system development charge, which is approximately $1,900, by 15% for either existing platted lots or existing lots that have been approved through a land use process, in my opinion, to increase, to add that 15% over a period of 3 years creates a whole lot of paperwork and tracking of different lots and where they're at for a fairly small amount of increase. So as I note in my memo, the 15% increase itself is about $283 per single-family residential lot. And if you broke that out over a 3-year or 3-phase process, the first one would be $94, the next would be $188, and the next would be $283. And also the other thing that I noted was that builders don't typically submit 50 building permits in one subdivision at a time. They kind of come in gradually. So I really didn't see a huge benefit to creating that kind of record keeping. And I also thought it'd be confusing to people coming in for building permits as well. Like, well, wait a minute, I thought it was a $94 increase, and now you're telling me and it would just be a lot of confusion. So I recommend that we just go with the 15% as recommended in the original resolution. The other thing that was suggested was that we look at a 3-phase implementation process for the new SDC, and and this is certainly the Commission's discussion and decision, but my recommendation as staff is that we not extend the implementation schedule any longer than a 2-phased approach. And that is that the further you extend it, the more funds that you basically forfeit. You'll never get that money back. The building permits that come in at a lower SDC will not pay the full cost of the transportation SDC. So I think that in light of the economy and in light of the significant increase of the transportation system to charge, it is appropriate to bring it in over a 2-phase period so that people can plan for it. But in terms of 3 phases, the first 2 phases then of that, you really leave money on the table that we should be collecting to make transportation improvements to accommodate growth. And it is, in my opinion, somewhat our duty to collect the money to be able to construct new infrastructure that system development charges are intended to do. So certainly it's up to the Commission, but my recommendation would be not to forfeit any more money than you already will be with a two-phase implementation schedule. Then we also still, the city attorneys and us still kind of had to make sure all of our language was perfectly correct on our lots of records and parcels and lots and we finally perfected this resolution, and at the dais tonight, you'll see hopefully my very last illustration of changes to Section 3 for you that absolutely clarifies what we're meaning in terms of things that have been platted in the past and things that have just been approved by a land use process. And the recommendations don't particularly change. It still has the 15% increase, and in the case of the parcels that are already platted, the new SDC would become effective February 1st, 2011. In the case of parcels and lots that have only been approved through a land use process and they haven't been platted yet, the 15% increase would remain in effect till February 1st, 2013. But the commission could consider bringing the new SDC having it become effective anytime after February 1st, 2011, if the economy was going gangbusters, and it seemed like, well, why are we delaying this any longer? So, or maybe all those lots were built out by then, who knows? But anyway, those are just final clarifications on that. And then those minor corrections are included in the resolution that's at your place tonight. The other thing you'll find in your packet is the updated report from John Ghilarducci, the draft that would actually be attached to the resolution. It won't be stamped draft after we attach it, but that will include the project list and all the details about the methodology. And I think that pretty much covers all of the questions that were brought up at the last meeting, and if you have any more tonight, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
Are there any further questions this evening, or shall we go into the public hearing?
I have comments after.
Okay. This is not a land use public hearing. It's just an opportunity for you to comment on the proposal before you.
Mayor Norris, I'm sorry. One more thing is we did have an email from the Home Builders Association, Ernie Platt, and he wasn't able to come tonight, but he is in support of the final resolution.
Yes, thank you.
You have nothing to say about the 3 phases, huh?
No, he did not.
Appears he concurs with staff. I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone who has come prepared to comment on the transportation SDCs this evening? Is that for this? Okay. Amber, hold it then. Come forward, please.
Good evening again. Amber Holbeck, Oregon City Chamber. My apologies for the last City Commission meeting at about 9 o'clock. Home was calling, and it was time for me to return, so I was unable to answer the questions that you may have had in regard to the Chamber's letter. So I'm hoping to provide some clarification in that regard. The first piece is that this is neither a support nor against kind of a statement. The Chamber Board, while our Government and Economic Affairs Committee did say, yes, we support these SDCs, or the TSDC changes, the Board believed that more time, more effort, and more emphasis needed to be placed on the issue of redevelopment. Addressing the redevelopment issue in the future as it could become a feeling of anti-redevelopment, and the fact that Oregon City is chocked full of old or older buildings, there really needs to be an emphasis to some degree on that redevelopment. And it could certainly be, and I would kind of defer this to Nancy, there could also be confusion as to the rule in regard to a building having not been occupied for 18 months, you no longer qualify for SDC credits, and how that might make it more challenging for a new business to want to go in, develop that building, and build their business there. And so there might be some confusion as to, is 18 months a justifiable amount of time, especially if the market is a bit slow and sluggish. There may be properties that are extending beyond that 18-month window. So that's really, the only hang-up was in the redevelopment piece. But there was absolute corroboration and understanding that the SDCs have to be increased. There is no doubt.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Do you want to answer?
I would ask if the city attorney could look up the existing ordinance, and I
Yeah.
believe it might be 5 years instead of
think that's
18
right.
months.
Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm in support.
Please introduce yourself once more.
Paul Edgar, Kenema Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair. I'm in support of this, and I think it's about time. In fact, I would just like to draw some analogies. Kenema, my area, probably should have higher SDC fees, not lower. And the reason why, and I think you need to think about this a little bit in the process, is that we have no schools close to us. We have no shopping next to us. We virtually have no ability for people to come out of Kenema via bikes or trails. It's really pretty isolated. Therefore, the number of trip generations per household in Kenema is even greater. And that's the way the ITE manual says. And it's almost the same analogy as where Nancy is proposing that we have the corridor credit of 10% down because we have transit availability, but in a place like Kenema, maybe it should be 10% more. And in fact, I did a whole study of a whole bunch of land use applications going through the city planning, and I found most of them were radically understated from what the reality was of the number of trips that these new houses were going to be generating. And I became very concerned, so I asked to pull a bunch of these land use agreements so I could take a look at them and see what was happening. And I found that we had transportation consultants coming in and almost fraudulently understating trip generation when we knew that there were no bike trails, no shopping, no schools, and they should have been significantly higher. They should be at the 10.6 trips per household or even greater. So what we need to do, this is an excellent start. This is where we need to be. But we also need to have some degree of flexibility. And in fact, there should be, when we know firsthand that there are no parks, schools, or shopping, there's not a single store in Kenema that anybody can go to. That, yes, they should be charged, we should be able to go up higher, and that should be part of the formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who's come to speak? Thank you. Then I will close the public hearing. Now it's an opportunity for the commission to ask questions and deliberate. Commissioner Neely, did you wish to begin?
Well, with absolutely no support from the home builders, my statement. I think the thing that triggered this more than anything else was, and the amount doesn't concern me, but I believe our charts show that we were going to have the second highest SDCs if this passed. I understand other communities are going to look at theirs, and theirs are going to go up as well. Frankly, I was just thinking about the number of unbuilt lots that you said 700 altogether. Is that right, Mr. Dentlin?
Yes.
A lot of unbuilt lots that aren't being built, whether there might be an incentive to go ahead. If there was an incentive to go ahead, I guess I would argue that we'd be getting the SDCs sooner, and that might be worth a little bit more to us than them coming in later. So your argument there, I guess I'm not that comfortable with. If the effect of the phase-in did what I would like it to do, was actually create some additional building earlier on in the city. It may not have any such effect at all, as you say, relative to the cost of building. Those increases may not make a whole lot of difference, but I don't know that. However, that's surely not going to be a reason for me to vote against what we have here. But I feel there was a logic in what I was doing, and I'm not sure I think you would increase your administrative headache by 50% above what you've made it now, because you are having a two-phase.
I was one who also asked to hold it over so that we could think about it a little bit, since it was a big presentation last time with a lot of detail. I appreciate the thoroughness of the staff report and the fact that you revised some things because of the discussion. I appreciate that. I also, as I ran in my head the conversations from the testimony last time, nobody wanted the property owners who spoke, including home builders, perhaps thought that they, weren't totally enthusiastic about paying more. However, if they had to, they liked the phased approach, which meant that this appeared to be a fair proposal. And I am a believer that growth should pay for itself. We are a fast-growing city, and so we do have needy infrastructure, especially in transportation. So I think that you've convinced me that this is a thorough and fair report, and I know that if times change in the future, we can revisit it as well, because I think no one can really predict what the market's going to do and what our construction industry is going to do in the future. So I'm really comfortable with it now. If anyone else is, we're willing to put a motion on the floor if you'd like.
I just want to make one comment. There was one, I assume the person was a developer, I don't recall, was opposed to the increase at all, saying that we didn't even used to have SDCs and things were going fine. If you go, from example, you want to go from Central Point Road over to 213, the nicest route would be a nice McCord, what's the street that goes, I guess it's McCord onto Leland, and a connection through there. And it's just an awful route. It ought to be something that if it's not a major collector, not a minor arterial, at least it should be a major collector. And those are the kinds of issues that we deal with, because we really don't have that much control of what gets built out first, and as a result, we get areas that are otherwise going to have to wait until you have sufficient infill to correct some of those problems, and the problems by that point might really be almost incorrectable or so expensive that would be beyond the kinds of charges that we're doing here. And I think our experience in Oregon City indicates that, in fact, SDCs are an essential piece of our ability to finance working road system. I don't think we could do it otherwise.
And is that a motion?
And I would move to approve. If you tell me what I'm approving, I would move to.
It's the revised version of the resolution.
Okay.
before you now.
And the revisions, with the revisions presented to us, I wish to approve Resolution 0902, new transportation system development charge methodology, with the revisions that we have before us.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Is there further comment or discussion? Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to say that at first I was really interested in the three-phase, but I think staff adequately explained that I'm comfortable with two phases now with the answer from staff. But I also think that Paul raised a very good point. That's something we should think about as a topic for the future. A neighborhood that's completely isolated, that definitely is going to generate more trips. So I think that was a very good, very, very, very good idea to look into. All right. So.
Further comment or discussion? Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nacita,
Aye.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. We have new SDCs. Thank you all for your participation. Oh, we will, let's take a 5-minute break, please. We are now back in session and looking at our general business agenda. The first item is to consider the approval of a cooperative agreement with ODOT and Pacific Property Search related to the Cove project. This is the negotiated agreement that we talked about at our last meeting. Oh, we're missing our city manager.
We don't need,
And we are waiting for your staff report on the ODOT Cove project.
Actually, I'm turning that over to...
see, I told you we didn't need it.
How typical.
This is for our attorney, Mr. Sullivan.
Madam Mayor, members of the commission, you have before you a slightly revised agreement between the city and ODOT, which is meant to resolve the appeal brought by ODOT against the Planning Commission's approval of design review of the Cove project. You have before you that agreement. My understanding, since I was not at the last meeting, was that the only change is the map showing the location of the gate. I know this has been discussed before. The underlying appeal is not tonight before you, but in a sense it is, in that it is likely that if you approve the agreement, that ODOT will withdraw the appeal on the Cove Design Review project. There have been things said about this, and I just want to try to respond to a couple of them. I know this will probably be the subject of some discussion tonight. You've got two things before you. You've got actually three things. You've got an agreement with Pacific Property Search, which has a potential sub-agreement with Kaiser, which has not been signed. You all know that. You have a Planning Commission decision on the land use issue of the design review. That is before you ultimately if the appeal is pursued. By virtue of this agreement, that appeal would be withdrawn by ODOT, and there would be no further proceedings on that. There has been some discussion about what's the relationship of the Kaiser non-agreement on the proceedings, both for the agreement before you tonight and the land use decision. The land use decision is not dependent on the Kaiser agreement. And essentially, you have a land use decision before you, if the appeal is pursued, that you have to answer, regardless of whether Kaiser is in the picture or not. It may be that the applicant has a pig in a poke, because they may not be able to follow through on the design review, may have to file another application, and may have to deal with that. The applicant has not withdrawn the application. The appeal may be withdrawn if you proceed with the entry into the agreement. And the agreement, I know has been discussed perhaps ad nauseum before the City Commission before. ODOT's had a problem with Agnes Road, whether it's a private road or a public road. To some extent, this agreement, to use Bill Kabizman's word, kicks the ball down the road. and does not decide whether or not that is a public or private road. If it is a public road, then there's an issue over whether ODOT must deal with an access permit. There's disagreement, as I understand it, between city staff and ODOT on that. That issue is not resolved by the agreement. It is deferred. Whether or not Pacific Property Search goes through with the agreement is really up to them. But you're obliged to give an answer to the application that's been before you. And even though that's not before you tonight directly, you are limited in the record to the facts that were raised to the Planning Commission. And whatever happens subsequently is not before you. You are also limited in the land use appeal, again, which is not before you, to the issues that were raised in the ODOT appeal. So, having muddied the water completely, I'm prepared to try to respond to questions. Both the planning director and the city engineer are also here to help you on the technical issues.
Okay, as we talked about last time, too. And I just would like to note that Gail Curtis of ODOT is with us this evening, so we have the ability to talk about that.
And you have the agreement in final form before you. My understanding is if you approve this, ODOT has a letter withdrawing the appeal as soon as the agreement is signed. But that's up to you, and it's a different issue.
Okay, are there questions or a motion on this? Commissioner Neely.
I'm just going to make a comment.
Sure.
Partially because Mr. Edgar brought up Washington Street connection there. The northbound 213 traffic that's trying to gain access to the southbound 205 has to yield to local traffic coming out from the Clackamas River side, that is southbound traffic. It's not that great of an issue because there's almost no local traffic coming out. But the kind of development here would presumably, potentially increase that traffic, and I think would be a major issue. Having traffic that's on a state highway, a major state highway, having to yield to local traffic to get onto a interstate is a bad situation. And I can understand ODOT's concern about that. I think this agreement has the opportunity that if one day we can solve interchange problems there, that perhaps something can be done to permit traffic to flow out of any development that occurs there and gain access to 205 or 213 via Agnes. But I really think it would be a traffic nightmare if it were to go forward in this in the way that it was originally proposed. And I've already stated that I had problems with even having that access to the frontage road onto McLaughlin at all, going next to the shopping center. But I think the Agnes situation is even worse. And so I understand ODOT's concern on this. And based on other discussion here, I'm probably going to support the resolution that we have before us.
Would you like to make a motion?
I have some questions before we make a motion, if that's all right.
Oh, sure.
And I'd like
Commissioner Nocita.
to invite Ms. Curtis and Mr. Tyler to the table if they're willing to answer some questions.
Mr. Sullivan, just a moment.
The one point I want to make, and it's fine to ask the questions, is that you've got a restricted record on the land use proceeding. Again, that's not before you, but you are able to ask those questions in the context of the agreement.
Okay. So I'm asking a question about a document that is in the record of the land use proceeding.
That's fine.
Okay.
The only thing you're going to have to segregate in your own mind, if we have to ever get to the land use proceeding, that this is not as part of the record. Okay.
Okay. Let me preface what I'm going to say is by sharing with the public that I expressed some concerns to staff and to council regarding the timing of the access permit, because I don't want to expose our taxpayers to the outlay that is planned in this project when there is uncertainty about the access permit, and that because there is this big, off in the future, we might, outlay money for a project that ultimately we can't get a permit to support. And I have a suggestion that I think solves my concern. But I want to ask both of you first, Ms. Curtis, in the Planning Commission hearings, you and Mr. Auth were very, very, very insistent. One, that an access permit would be required, and two, that the standards aren't met for such an access permit. And I'm curious if, after all of these letters that were written by Mr. Auth and Mr. Jensvold, and what exactly right now is your position on this that you feel comfortable entering into this agreement?
Well, just to be clear,
Move it closer, move it closer.
Move that a little closer.
this is Gail Curtis with ODOT. There is no access being proposed associated with this agreement. That's the core aspect of this agreement. We've always agreed to emergency access. So I am not sure what your concern is about whether there is an access permit or not.
Well, according to these documents, a permit is required to connect Agnes to Washington Street.
Okay, I think I understand.
An approach permit.
Those comments are in the record based on the applicant's proposal to connect to the interchange.
Correct.
And we've never been supportive of that connection. We've always been supportive of the development. And the agreement before you is such that there would be no connection, vehicular connection. We've always been supportive of the bicycle and pedestrian provision.
So are you saying that?
So I think it's a moot point.
Are you saying that beyond Phase 1 and 2 of the project, Phase 1 and 2 is only for grading, et cetera, and for construction of Agnes? 40 years down the road, when there are actual buildings and condominiums generating fairly intense traffic, would the access approach permit be necessary at that time?
For what purpose?
For connection to Washington Boulevard, or to Washington Street?
Yes, any time that you want to make a connection to the interchange, to Washington Street, a ODOT permit through Division 51 would be required. However, this agreement...
I'm not talking about the agreement.
Okay, good.
I'm
All
talking
right.
about the...
We can continue to have that conversation.
Is there the possibility that you will have to grant the City of Oregon City an approach permit?
What,
Is it, what
An
your
access
question was,
permit
is
or
it
approach-
likely?
is that in order? May I ask?
Yeah, you can ask the question. The issue is whether or not you have to, ODOT's position is you've got to have a permit to make the connection. The answer, though, is do you have to make the connection? And the answer, I think, is no.
Yeah, so.
But do we need that traffic volume to develop the Cove project? Did that traffic access develop the Cove project?
According to the developer, no.
Okay, then what
Yeah, but I'll
what
let
concerns
Mr.
what
Tyler speak for
concerns were you
himself on that.
expressing in all of these documents then during the Planning Commission hearings?
There was,
Would you-
one of the scenarios was to have access to the development from the 213 interchange as well as McLaughlin Boulevard. So the record speaks to both of those. And as things are hopefully going to go forward, there will just be access, vehicular access from McLaughlin Boulevard, either through Dunes or through what we're calling the Firestone Alley driveway.
At full build-out?
At any point in the development. And then there'd just be the bicycle and pedestrian access at the north end towards the 213 interchange.
I'm sorry, I missed last week's meeting, and I had just looked at these graphs, which are poor photo reproduction. So access to the project will be from Dunes Drive and through Firestone Alley, or it will be from the Main Street extension.
Good point. That's correct.
Okay, phew, I thought you were saying, okay.
That's an
There
important
is-
connection.
There is two
Those are the
access.
same thing.
I was just speaking to the state facilities.
Well, yes, they're the same
but-
thing. You could go two different, be coming from two different ways.
Commissioner
So
Neely?
you are never
Just-
going
just a
to...
minute.
Sure.
Commissioner Neely, please.
I think, you're talking you might be talking about so far in the future. I mean, my assumption is that there may be more and more use there. The point is, we know we have challenges on the 213, 205 intersection. At one point, maybe ODOT and the federal government and we can come up with the funds to make some major changes there. And I presume when those kind of changes occur, then we can request access to Washington Street.
Right.
Under current conditions, we can't. That's what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we always want to work in partnership with Oregon City and the county to achieve these types of improvements.
Commissioner Smith. Oh.
Randy Tyler.
Thank you.
Well, and I think the other thing is, we don't need to have access to Agnes at this point in time. We can handle the flows that'll be generated by the project at full build-out with the alternate means that are available for access.
Now, Commissioner Smith.
After looking at the map and having time to understand it a little bit more, well, first of all, the issue that Commissioner Nocita was talking about, and even the city attorney talking about the fact that we're not really resolving this issue, we're just kind of kicking it down the road until the future when we're going to have to deal with this at some point anyway. I think it's really naive to think that the city is going to build a street that they're never going to want access for. So I think we know in the future that the city is going to want to have access, and it's clear that ODOT's saying we're not going to grant that now or in the future unless there's some major changes. And I think that's my glitch on this right now, is to we're not going to build a street that we're not going to ever use. Okay, so why are we not dealing with the access situation now? And why are we delaying it till the future? Because we're going to have to deal with it at some point. Why not deal with it before the development comes in?
Commissioner Neely.
We're not dealing with vehicular access now. Pedestrian and bike access would I definitely hope it will occur between Agnes Washington Street to gain access to the pedestrian bridge, for example. So I would say that we shouldn't. I mean, I gave my argument just a bit ago why we shouldn't have access to Washington Street, because it's going to create a situation that's, to me, untenable, having a state highway having to yield to local access to gain access to a interstate. Just an untenable situation. I don't see how, and I'm sure that's. Well, I'm sure that was ODOT's concern. It surely is mine.
Commissioner Nocita.
Let me clarify this construction of the street. In Phase 2 of the project, the developer PPS constructs Agnes Street from North Park all the way to Washington Street.
That's correct, and it'll be for emergency access.
And there will be
only.
bollards at the border
That's
of
right.
the... Okay, so that is the construction of a new public right-of-way that's dedicated?
Yes, that will be, it will be
Okay.
public.
Why doesn't that trigger the access permit requirement?
It's not connecting.
But at some time in the future, if it does connect, that's the
If it-
time and access?
Right.
So the possibility exists. And at that future time, the possibility exists that we'll need an access permit. Because there are standards, we don't know what the future's going to hold. In the future, we could apply for that permit. It could get denied. I would rather resolve that now. And I want to share my amendment that I think does resolve that. Just so We can guard the public fisc.
Could we hear from Gail's response
Sure.
to that first, because that clears up anything?
If I understand you correctly, you're concerned about the investment in a
That's a-
street that doesn't connect to
In
the
the,
interchange.
in the whole project.
That,
Investment in the whole project.
the whole project,
Yes.
the investment in the whole project. Well, what the developers have told us, and Mr. Tyler just said, is that they don't need that connection to the interchange in order for their development to be successful. Agnes Road is important, and it will not only serve the development, but it will provide access to the citizens of Oregon City and the surrounding area to access the waterfront and the recreational opportunities that exist there and that will be developed, as well as there's a potential for Agnes to connect to a future bridge. In your TSP, there's indication that there should be a vehicular connection, a bridge to Gladstone.
Okay.
So we're doing this per your TSP.
I do
And so,
understand that.
so I guess the short answer is that there's a belief on the part of the parties involved that the project will be successful without the street connection.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that at some point in time, the city could ask for, if it so chose, for a connection from Agnes onto that intersection. But we don't need to do that, and our traffic consultants have indicated that even at full build-out, we don't need that connection.
Would you be comfortable then stating that in this agreement then? That Agnes shall never be used as part of the growth project for through traffic?
Nancy, let's have a response from staff.
I just wanted to clarify a couple things, and I want to let you know that I think that this agreement is a good agreement, and it takes us, it really does, it's important that we have a lot more conversation about the whole issue of Agnes and the interchange when we have more data, more time to really do a study, and that's something that ODOT and the city have agreed to, that just there's more information that's needed for the ultimate configuration of that whole area. And the other issue is that Agnes is shown as a connection to 213 in our TSP. So there's some TSP issues that need to be resolved, and that can be done in time. And the other thing that I wanted to let the commission know that the planning department thought this through fairly thoroughly, and to partly address Commissioner Neely's concerns is that the planning department really had only proposed that Agnes operated as a one-way, which would be southbound, until all of these other issues are resolved, because recognizing the fact that stop sign where you have to go out to 213 is problematic for the Agnes and Washington Street traffic. So, but there are a lot of very complicated issues but this agreement definitely takes care of the public right-of-way demands, it takes care of demands of this particular development, and I believe that any roadway that would be built with this development will be utilized by the public to a good extent.
Commissioner Smith.
I think that Agnes is absolutely a crucial street for a development in that area personally. Just from the point of view, if I was buying a condo there, and I was going to Portland every day, coming off 205, I'd want to have access, and I wouldn't want to have to go through McLaughlin Boulevard or the shopping center. You have to go a long ways around. So I think it's pretty evident that at some point we want that street open. And my feeling is that the only thing holding the project from going forward is this appeal. And I get the feeling that this agreement is made just so we can get the project going and not necessarily just because Agnes is not needed.
I think as we discussed last time, that this was a negotiated agreement that ODOT and Pacific Property Search and the city worked very hard to put together through many meetings, many iterations. And so I think that I guess we're not being presented with anything else. And the way that, in my experience here, which is a very short time, as we move forward on projects, like we revise the TSP, we work on the conditions that present themselves to us later, but the parties involved on this particular project have resolved their conflict in this particular way. So I think we have to honor the work that they're putting forward today, because I'm not sure what would happen if we today said Agnes had to be open. I think I'm not sure that would get us any further down the road.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just in response to Commissioner Smith's comment, is the Agnes issue, there was a healthy disagreement between ODOT and the city. It did not involve the development, as the traffic studies indicate, as Mr. Tyler indicates, that can operate any which way. This agreement is actually a resolution of that addresses the question before us today, as well as talks about how we will resolve that in the future when we have more information, need, or data. So that's what this agreement is about.
Commissioner Nocita.
I'd like to state what my proposed amendment is. On page 3 of the agreement, under Terms of Agreement, I would like the language of item 8 to be replaced with the following language.
Just a moment. I don't see a page.
Yeah,
Page
it's
3.
on page 3. It's number 8,
Number
right
8.
above the...
The current language reads, ODOT and the city agree to review access and configuration of Agnes Avenue at the request of either party. I would like to replace that with the following language. The city shall not issue any grading permit for any phase of the Cove project until ODOT has issued an approach or access permit pursuant to OAR, Chapter 734, Division 51, for Agnes Avenue access to Washington Street. Now, what this does, it allows the project to proceed, but it recognizes that we're spending $8 million of the taxpayers' money on grading, and we need to resolve that issue before we expend the taxpayers' money on that.
I'm a little confused.
Yeah, me too.
That either.
You tell me exactly what will happen if the development goes forward under your amendment.
Yeah.
It won't go forward unless we have the access permit. It makes the access permit a prerequisite.
But we make
It's resolving that problem in advance instead of kicking it back into the future where we expose the taxpayers to whatever uncertainties are there.
It's intended to be a development killer then.
That's what it sounds like to me, too.
Yeah.
I'm going to move that
Neely?
we approve the cooperative agreement between ODOT and Pacific Property Search related to the Cove project.
I'll second it.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. Is there further comment or discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Nocita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 3-2. So because that passed, then does ODOT have an announcement? A reaction?
Thank you for your cooperation and staff's help, the developer, all the parties that did spend a lot of time and effort in resolving these various issues. So I appreciate it and would like to submit this letter withdrawing our land use appeal for CP 0805.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
So you do not need the signature right now?
Yeah, I do. Actually, that's maybe yes.
We'll take a brief...
Contingent on your...
We'll take a brief recess while I sign
Thank
this.
you.
Just a moment. We'll continue our general business under item 7B, the right-of-way services for number 24720-1. Amendment number 1, right-of-way services agreement with Rail Highway Crossings Program Project 10th Street.
Are we,
And that would be...
Pardon?
we're at 7B.
Yes.
Did you want to-
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, excuse me. Yeah, that's where we are.
We are at
I just
7B.
confirmed it.
Thank you very much. And with that good introduction, Nancy Kroschauer with a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. This is a bit of housekeeping matter. We have an agreement with ODOT for the 10th Street Railroad Crossing Improvements Project, and as part of that, we have a right-of-way services agreement. This agreement extends the date of that right-of-way services agreement, which had previously been dated to be completed by, I believe it was by June 30th, 2009. And so we want to extend it to 2010. And then the other thing that this does is revises the special provisions within the agreement that allows the documents to be signed separately by different parties and still considered to constitute one agreement. Unlike the bluebacks that you just signed, they have to take them back and then they send us back and all that monkey business. This way, as long as everybody's signed on one agreement, then they can constitute one agreement.
Okay, so really a technical issue.
Yes.
Housekeeping, essentially. Are there any questions on this, or a motion, please? Commissioner Smith.
Is this connected with the safety pull-out?
Yes,
Very
it
good.
is, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
That's,
go ahead.
Commissioner West.
well, we were all kind of talking, but when I saw this, I thought 10th Street, and then I thought, yes, it's the pull-out where they're going to widen the coffee
Right.
into the coffee shop so that people are queuing up on
Yeah. Or
in a dangerous way, and this gives them an emergency
If a train
pull-up.
comes by,
But
that's
it's
right.
amazing how long these things take, because when did we start this?
a while ago.
Yeah, a while ago.
July 23rd, 2007, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I remember, that's a year and a half.
It's
Commissioner Smith.
also another opportunity to bring up the point that visuals are very important, and every time we get these things, I look at maps or no maps, and I have no idea what we're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really just didn't even think of that when I was putting this together, and I appreciate your comment.
Because I mean, we all know the streets, so I'm thinking 10th Street, and I'm trying to think where, but
It's easier for us to
if
have
I have a
map.
picture and I know what it's talking about, I can connect
I
it to.
apologize.
It's really important.
I'll
I
try
think
to
part of it
remember.
is, that maybe Dutch Brothers is mentioned here, but
I don't think anything
I don't
was
think it
mentioned,
is.
so there was no connection.
It is sort of difficult because, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is designed to maybe get one or two cars out of the way in case a train comes. That's all it's designed to do.
correct.
So it's really not it's not really developing with a capacity issue that we've got there. I mean, that at certain times, that traffic gets backed up
Yeah,
going
yeah.
both directions. There's people that want to turn
Turn
left
in.
into it that are going, and really mess up people trying to go up Singer Hill, too. We
Yes.
got to get 12th Street connected
And
really
that's-
quickly.
we do get
Yes.
we do get some concerns expressed about that, and our reply is that if you're going up Singer Hill and you get stopped, you can go around the person that's turning left into Dutch Brothers. That's okay. And then for coming down, it would have been nice if when they developed that site, we would have been able to have them relocate their driveway. But because of the particular kind of land use it was, they were basically just turning an old coffee
yeah.
cart into
Oh,
a
yeah.
new,
Right.
albeit somewhat nicer
Right.
coffee shop. So we really didn't have the ability to require them to make such major changes to the site.
Okay, may I have a motion for this? If you have no more questions, please. Commissioner West?
Yes, I move approval of the right-of-way services agreement, number 24720-1, with the right-of-way services agreement for the Rail Highway Crossings Program Project on 10th Street.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Is there further comment or discussion? Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to request, if you would, to have the agenda 7D discussed first, because I've got ancillary questions on C and E afterwards, and I think
Okay.
we'll just get better flow there. If that's
All right.
okay with you.
Sure, that's great. We will take item 7D, which is the Sixth Amendment to extend the existing library lease with Hilltop Mall, which takes it through December 31st of this year. Mr. Archer? our Community Services Director, for the staff report, please.
Mayor Norris and Commissioners, thank you. This is a very simple amendment to that existing lease with Hilltop Mall for the library space. And as you said, Mayor Norris, it takes us through the end of the calendar year. We've discussed this a number of times. Basically, each time that the lease extension comes up, there seem to be questions about the kind of the short-term lease extensions. And again, just as a sort of background and another reminder that we're continuing to work with the ownership at Hilltop Mall on our existing situation, and they've been more than generous with us. They've not raised our rent basically through these extensions since 2006 was the end of the last lease, and we've continued to extend it under that same lease rate. And they've worked with us and continue to offer us opportunities to stay at the mall, even if they do go through a potential renovation of some sort. So we're going to continue to work with them. Craig Danielson happens to be here, not necessarily for this item, but so I do want to recognize them for being really, frankly, a good landlord for us. And then, frankly, our longer term idea, of course, is to work on a facility planning, and we continue to work through that process as we go forward. And as you know, with the passage of our library district, that's a viable discussion now. So, at any rate, that's sort of a little bit more background. But this is just a simple extension, and it takes us through the end of the year. As that time frame approaches, again, we'll work with the ownership at the mall and see what our options are as we move forward.
Okay. We have a motion for approval. Commissioner West.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing in light of last night's meeting where we were discussing issues in Oregon City, and criticism came up of our library. And I would like to point out to Mr. Danielson and everyone else here that his property is in fine condition. It's the lack of community support for funding a library that really is the issue at hand, and nothing about his building.
Exactly.
Well, first of all, you better take that back about lack of community support when
Right,
that
library.
particular
Yeah,
issue
I know,
passed.
we passed that,
Yes, by a huge margin.
but yes.
Yes. Okay. Motion, please. Commissioner Smith, is that you?
Oh, okay. I move to authorize the city manager to execute the Sixth Amendment to extend the existing Oregon City Library lease.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Neely. Is there further comment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote, please, Nancy.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And again, how about a hand for Mr. Danielson, You've been such a strong supporter of the city and of the library. We appreciate that. All right, next item of business. We have two that we will take one after the other. Both of them are stimulus money, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and involve the realignments of Molalla Avenue and Beaver Creek Road. First one is Agency Agreement 25-500 and concerns the alignment of Molalla Avenue and Warner Milne Beaver Creek intersection. And Nancy Krasnower here is here for the staff report.
That's correct, and these are documents that spell out the obligations of both the State Department of Transportation and the city in developing the contract documents, bidding the documents, and constructing the project using the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding. As you know, we received local agency money in the amount of $900,000 to make the improvements. We originally started with proposing both intersections on Molalla at Beaver Creek and Warner Milne in the interest of streamlining our schedule because of the right-of-way acquisition that we need to get at Beaver Creek and Molalla. We are using all the funds here at Warner Milne and Molalla. And the intergovernmental agreement, or the local agency agreement, is basically reads us all of the requirements we have to make sure we get that money and don't have to pay it back. And then the second agreement is the right-of-way agreement, and that lists the obligations and the responsibilities that ODOT will have and the city will have in acquiring some small bits of right-of-way and some construction easements for the actual intersection realignment project.
Questions about either of these? Commissioner Neely?
Yeah, there are more general questions in nature, but you've indicated that the allocation of those funds will be for the Warner Milne and Molalla intersection. The Beaver Creek Road and Molalla intersection was there in the picture originally, and I would just because many things have been done there, even in the time I've been on the commission, and I was just wondering what the issues at that intersection are that hadn't been addressed earlier.
Yes, to clarify this map, there's been a little confusion, the fact that Beaver Creek has two ends and they're both at Warner Milne.
Yeah.
So,
I was hoping I thought you were going to do
So-
the whole trapezoid of roads there and everything
No,
at the same time.
and quite
but-
frankly, normally we would have provided you with that corrected throughout, and even in the description of the project. But in the interest of expediting these agreements, ODOT has said, don't worry about that little stuff. We'll correct that later because everybody knows what the project's really about.
We all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, we all know what we're talking about. It's trouble, but the improvement at the Beaver Creek Road intersection with Molalla down here is to add a eastbound right turn lane if you want to go southbound on Molalla.
Okay.
And that's an alignment issue as well, making it, there's a lot of confusion about how you get across.
I'm going to ask another question about
Sure.
that same
Go ahead.
intersection, if I may. And I know it's not before us, but you have that, it's almost like a frontage road that goes by what was Oregon City Glass. I don't know if it is anymore, but in any case, at once, it was intended to actually only local access, but that didn't work because everybody was going through it. I think it's still confusing to me as I approach it what I should do, whether I should cut across that and not have such a good merge onto Molalla, or whether I should go to directly to Molalla and make the right turn rather than using that frontage road. It is a little confusing, and because that frontage road doesn't really doesn't merge that well into Molalla, whereas the signalized intersection, I'm sure, is a much safer one.
That's correct.
If this thing had ever gone forward, would we ever looked at doing something different than what's evolved?
Yeah, it's a very, very complicated story, and I won't go into it in detail tonight, but the way it's configured today was a negotiation between the property owners and the city when that intersection was corrected, when it used to be a T intersection at Danielson's. And the initial desire of the city was to have what's now called Beaver Creek Way, to have Beaver Creek Way not connect. And the property owners in there found that was going to be very inconvenient for them and their businesses. So we agreed to connect it just in a one-way. And we do recommend that you use the intersection at the signalized intersection.
So only if I go to
trips.
those businesses.
That's
Right.
correct.
Okay.
Then you have a way out. And we actually looked at reversing that one-way out, the one-way out into
to get
one-way
back to the
in,
intersection.
because it would help the circulation for the glass company. And to make that kind of improvement is extremely, for such a small improvement, you'd think it would be very reasonable, but I think for that improvement was going to be several $100,000. So we've been in touch with them, talking to them, letting them know that we're not going to be able to make any more changes there. The ultimate configuration of that is to actually connect in the long-term Beaver Creek Road access management plan shows it disconnecting for good, but then you have a connection through some of the other properties around there. There's more interconnectivity,
Yeah.
so you can get out to a signalized intersection.
Okay. Signalized intersection that we already have, except it doesn't go anywhere.
That's correct.
That
one.
Someday.
Okay, may I have a motion, please? If there are no further questions. One of you,
Is it going to be for both of them? I only have 7 seats.
Commissioner West.
I move approval for the local agency agreement number 25500 of the ARR&A money of 2009, Molalla Avenue, Warner Milne, Beaver Creek intersection in Oregon City.
And ARRA is an abbreviation for
Economic
stimulus, for stimulus
Yes,
package.
it's
Okay.
not for all the American, I know, it's hard to remember. American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, stimulus money.
Do we need to have the project named in the motion? The new project name?
No, it's fine.
Okay, okay, good.
Did you get second?
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Neely. Seeing no further comments, Nancy, please take the vote.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely.
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, another item that Nancy talked about. Yes. Yes.
I think it's just worthy noting that both the city staff, not necessarily me, but our staff, and ODOT have been working very, very, very hard on all of those ARRA projects. And I've been impressed. Granted, there's way, way more regulations than you wish there were, but there's, it's just amazing to see people working so hard to get this together. And then the other thing is just kind of fun to think about, if you think about throughout the country in the next few months, there will be city commissions and county commissions all over the country signing agreements that are very similar to this in an effort to use this money that our Congress has passed on to us. So
Well, I think it's rather
pretty
amazing
exciting.
that so many public jurisdictions and bureaucracies, when they're told they have to hurry up and do something, can actually do it.
Actually can.
Well, we're
Yes.
always ready to do things fast.
Yeah.
Luckily, we have some pre-planning that's happened ahead of that, so, good, thank you. Do we have a motion on this one? We do not.
Yeah.
May I have a motion, please?
Yeah, I move for the intergovernmental agreement for right-of-way services number 25657 for the ARRA for the Warner Milne Road Beaver Creek Molalla intersection, which I guess is really the Warner Milne Beaver Creek intersection.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Is there further comment? Nancy, please poll the board.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely.
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Yes, Commissioner Neely?
Yeah. What I understand of what we have here is one of two projects that are coming from the stimulus package through the state, the other one being the promenade. Is that correct?
The project that you signed off on
is-
tonight is actually money that came through the local agency process to
Oh,
cities and counties.
Okay, directly to cities and counties.
That's correct. And it came through our MPO, which is Metro.
Okay.
And then the McLaughlin Promenade project is money that's coming out of the state share. of the
Okay,
stimulus
I'm
fund.
glad I
from
asked the
ODOT.
question. Okay. The other question I had is, we have several projects that we're looking for stimulus monies for. Though, I mean, there's still the potential that we have projects that can be funded by stimulus money. Is that not correct? Okay. So this is not necessarily the end of the projects we're going to get.
No, a lot depends on how all the other projects in the state go. If some projects can't move forward in the timing that it takes, you have to obligate your funds by certain dates, and if you cannot do that, then the money goes back to the state pool. And of course, we have made it clear to the state that we are interested in acquiring ARRA money for the jug handle project. And then we're also going to be talking to the Main Street program, because there's also a possibility that we could replace some sidewalks and ramps on Main Street. That it would be a very small project, have very little environmental regulation connected with it. So we're kind of getting in line with the county on that as well.
Are there any more potential funds coming? And I could address this to the mayor too, but you all know it's on the list, coming still through the Metro process.
Yes, and in fact, I believe at our next JPAC meeting, which is the 8th, we'll be talking about another list of projects.
I think those are,
I thought they were stimulus, not?
it is stimulus money, but it's for example, if the cities and counties aren't able to spend their money on time, what are we going to do with it? And we're going to be meeting with the C4 Technical Advisory Committee to provide our proposals to Metro as to whether or not we'd want to provide more funds to projects that weren't fully funded to begin with, or if there's other projects that are shovel-ready and ready to go.
So, in other words, for example, the Jug Handle project is not going that direction.
There wouldn't be enough money at the metro, city, county level to fund a jug handle project. However, at the state level,
Mhm.
it is still possible.
And the
to fund
federal
jug
level.
handle.
So it's
Yeah.
not ruled out yet.
Oh, no.
There's also some stormwater money that we've been applying for. There's a rain garden that we're designing for this Molalla intersection project that we've applied to DEQ state revolving fund money for through the stimulus package. And then we were also thinking about putting in an application for the upper Newell Creek Basin here, these wetlands over here between the city and the county red soils area. We've got that project that we tried to get Nature of the Neighborhoods money for, and that's another possibility for the stormwater revolving fund money.
You know, since, and I understand this is all this is all new and this is all fast, and
Right,
everybody's
fast.
trying to think of projects. I mean, I probably could think of a couple, too. I was going to suggest, and I don't know if you could fit it into the next study session, I presume the agenda's taken care of, but actually having a listing of the projects that we are pushing forward through the processes, and
I think that'd be
maybe even have a discussion of, because you're coming up with ones I haven't even heard of now in your discussions, and I think I feel embarrassed if
I think that's a
I'm in a
great
position
idea.
of not being able to say what the city's thinking about, but perhaps also giving some input as to what other projects might not
That
be
would be
there.
terrific.
Yeah, and there was also utility money available, and I don't know that we are qualified for any of those, but for water reservoirs, which we've already upgraded. But and it's my understanding that the county has hired a sort of a stimulus person, guru, now to help us know how to access those monies that are coming in various different silos that we may not know about. So, do you know that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I was told by one of the commissioners that they had. Stimulus coordinator. Yes.
You put the electric probe here, and then you put the electric. How does that work?
But and Senator Schrader, Representative Schrader, has also a staff person that's working full time on making sure that we get the appropriate information. So, so on that, let's make sure we talk about the COPS grant that we're applying for and all kinds of
Yeah,
other
yeah.
things,
Yeah.
because we really do have aspirations towards those funds, because we're really ready for a lot of those projects and very needy. So thank you. I think that's a good report to see, because there are community rumors out there about what we're spending our money on. Next, if there's no further comment on that, let's move into the consent agenda, which we've now separated. So on both of those, I would, just because I've heard through the community that people seem to not understand that our sesquicentennial resolution to bring the state capital back to Oregon City was not a real thing. I'd like to, with your indulgence, I would like to insert the word mock in front of resolution.
Oh, come on. No. You're kidding.
Well, I've actually gotten a lot of comment from people that
But
thought
wait a
it
minute.
was...
If it actually passed, would you object? Now, you think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I probably would, but...
And the fact that today is April 1st, and so this could be just a prank.
That's right. So don't put mock, put prank.
Well, for the first set of minutes, I would like to do that one, and then for the second set of minutes, I would also put mock petitions in honor of Oregon's 150th birthday.
I'm sorry, but the words were never used at these minutes and meetings, and I will vote against the minutes if you do so. These words were not at all introduced at this. You can't do that.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes as written in both cases.
Well, just a moment here. You can't do that. But well, the minutes don't reflect the tone.
You can state it tonight what it is, and it will be reflected in these minutes.
Next minutes.
Madam Mayor, I would suggest that we postpone these minutes and you find appropriate places to put quotes around words instead.
No, that's fine. I don't think there's appropriate ways to do that, because I thought of quite a few different things. I just thought that one word would resolve it, but if there's no will to do that, I will move it back to the consent agenda. May I have a motion for adoption of the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith on the very important consent agenda. Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
And Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
And I always thought our mayor was a fun person, and she's really a stick in the muck. Or a stick in the muck. Or
Mock, stick in the mock. Stick in the mock. Well, I was really surprised how many people approached me and said, gosh, where would you really put all those buildings? I said, well, we're considering it on the landfill and right around on the riverfront, and we're going to give up Clackamas Park and move some of them down there.
We're going to move Tri-City Sewers.
Oh, I didn't consider that. Okay, that concludes our business agenda, and then we'll move into communications, and we'll begin with the city manager, Mr. Patterson.
Madam Mayor, members of the commission, I do have one item this evening, but before I get that, let me just state, after coming back off vacation, contrary to popular belief, the sun is still shining in other places of this globe. It is still large, it is warm, and it is uplifting, and it will come again.
Thank you for that depressing report.
Yes.
Did you bring some home?
No. What I want to discuss with you this evening, you have a resolution setting in front of you that would authorize the city to apply through the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for local government grant program. This is an application for a grant amount of $750,000. This application is a result of a request from Clackamas Heritage Partners. And I do apologize for the lateness of this, but there was a lot of loose ends that have just gotten tied up, and the deadline on this grant application is Friday. The grant application is for the first and second phase of the Falls Access project, and I'll hand out a copy of a brochure here that you can take a look at. It would actually be for the Heritage Core, which has to do with the entry court, some museum improvements, and some heritage services, both in archives and a research facility. And that amount is is $815,000. And then the Canopy Walk, which is the footbridge which would span the Tumwater Drive Gully, and some landscape restoration. That's in the amount of, that project is $458,000, so the total there is $1.2 million. It does require some matching dollars. The county has pledged $400,000, so it's my understanding that at the present time they have identified $1.1 million, or I think about $224,000 will have to come from some other sources. The city does not have funds associated with this grant amount. The only thing we're putting in is some staff time to apply, because the application has to come through a local government agency, and since it's in Oregon City, we were the agency that was requested to make that application. Now, should this application be granted, you will have a grant agreement that will come back to you that you will have to act on to receive those monies. It'll indicate what the stipulations are for you to receive the grant, and at that time you can decide whether you want to accept it or not accept those dollars. Now, I know that some of you have some concerns about the status of Clackamas Heritage Partners. If this grant application, it's my understanding that before we know of any resolution about whether we will receive it or not, that will come sometime in midsummer. By that time, hopefully, we will have the questions around CHP resolved. And again, this grant application is going to have to come back to you for you to approve. This is just a resolution to authorize us to apply. You will still have to make a decision whether you wish to receive this grant or not. You do have members of Clackamas Heritage Partners here this evening. If you have any questions, because they can definitely address this better than I, since this is not a project the city has been involved with.
A question. So if they all went well and this were granted by Oregon Parks and Rec, it essentially is pass-through money.
That's correct.
So
We're just
the
conduit for
necessary...
which the
Okay,
applicant,
because...
the money would come to the city, again, we would send that on to.
Okay, because we have not publicly discussed the Falls Access project to date. Commissioner West.
So does the, do they need any more matching funds than the $450,000 from the county? Is that enough? It's not an equal match?
Let me ask these gentlemen if they
Yes.
might be able to address those questions for you.
So is the
two of you come
1.2
forward,
million
please.
enough to the,
That's the total.
yeah, or is that,
That's 750,000. See, it's the difference between 750,000 and this.
We shared a microphone last night.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, please introduce yourselves.
Dan Fowler, current president of Clackamas Heritage Partners, and
Craig Danielson, Director of Clackamas Heritage Partners and Vice President, Clackamas County Historical Society, and 1500 Malala Avenue, Oregon City, Oregon.
Thank you. You don't need your address.
Commissioner West, to answer your question, the two phases, as city manager indicated, total, I got to put my glasses on here, approximately 1.2 million. With these two requests, it's 1.5, so it is slightly less. However, we have a number of discussions with Portland General Electric Foundation, the Grand Ronde Tribe, and others that are poised to become partners in various aspects of the project. So it's our contention that that shortfall would be made up.
oh, so you're looking for a match yet? Okay, great.
Further questions? Commissioner Nasita.
I just want to make it clear that I'm not supportive of this resolution. I live in the neighborhood where this proposed skyway will be built. The planning for this has taken place over 2 or 3 years at least. It's not been publicly discussed until recently. I've talked with my neighbors about this, who are going to be the neighbors next door to this project, along High Street between 2nd, say, and my house on 3rd. No one's ever had a clue about this project. It's been going on in secret. It is a potential nuisance to some of the neighbors who are going to be immediately adjacent to it. I informed my neighbors of the meeting that took place at the Museum of the Oregon Territory. Many of my neighbors showed up expecting to hear discussed this project discussed and the potential impacts that would have on their neighborhood. In fact, the project wasn't discussed, and in fact, there was an attempt to deflect any discussion of the project. I think Clackamas Heritage Partners has a lot of public outreach to do. This isn't city policy, and I'm frankly shocked that we're being presented with this proposal, and I would urge my commission colleagues to reject it.
Would you one more time describe phase
Commissioner
one and
Neely?
phase two?
Commissioner, would you ask a question again?
Could you once again describe phase one, phase two, and is it in fact integral to the Skyway?
Thank you, Commissioner Neely. The Phase 1 and Phase 2 project, and I'll give a broad stroke, there's a lot of detail, but primarily is the connection of the promenade to the museum. It would involve a vacation of Tumwater Street, an improvement of the parking area, some improvements of restrooms, parking reconfiguration at the museum, a small amount of work in the first floor of the museum, as well as then an access, we call it in the plan, a walk through the forest, but it's then a physical connection from the level of the museum over to the promenade, mainly for handicap accessibility then to the promenade and that connection. Worst case scenario, if the Skyway project did not proceed, it's a wonderful asset to the city and would stand in a sense alone of the Skyway. If appropriate, I'll address some of the other comments, but I just want to answer your question.
I wanted that clear, because actually I share some of the same concerns that Commissioner Nasita has, less so from me being on the promenade, but more so from a tremendous investment in an area that, actually, when we had our goal-setting session, we talked about where should we make large investments. We had an economist there, and I asked specifically about investments in the tourist industry, and he made the specific point that these do not tend to produce living wage jobs. And however, on phase 1 and 2, I think maybe the majority of the city commission felt this way about it, but when in fact the improvements were made, I'll say the improvements were made on 2nd Street and McLaughlin, that intersection. I think the bulk of the commission was seeking to have Tumwater closed at that particular time and recognize the need for the connection there. While I think I share your sentiments, I don't think these two phases are integral to actually the Skyway.
I agree.
And as such, I don't have any problem, because I think, first of all, that Tumwater connection that exists there for traffic coming onto Tumwater is dangerous. The police chief actually opposed it because he could not visualize the safety of cars having to come to that T-stop there at 2nd Street and getting onto it. And so it's something that I wish we had been able to, but ODOT is not always cooperative, and that did not happen. I probably will support the phase 1 and phase 2. After we get through this whatever motion comes forward, I'm going to have some other comments, though. But if it were integral to the Skyway project, I would in fact oppose it.
Commissioner Smith.
I spent every minute from about 4 o'clock today writing my list of concerns about this topic, and we only got the email at 2:30 today. None of us have heard anything about this before, had no knowledge of it at all. So I have huge concerns. But before I talk about that, I want to say I want more than anything the success of the CHP. I want more than anything the success of the museums in this town. I also absolutely believe that the biggest treasure in the city is the Falls. We know that that's the most visited site in the city. There's a track record for that. We know it. We know that that's the most underutilized site and has extreme potential. So I want everyone to know I am not arguing against those points. I think in the future that is a really crucial site that really could do some amazing things for Oregon City. So my opposition to this particular proposal tonight has nothing to do with those things. It does have a lot to do with the following. The fact that we got this at 2:30 this afternoon with no documentation of money. We've had to hear that verbally. No documentation of the phases. We've had to get that verbally. I don't want to vote on anything from now on into the future that's given to me the day before the day of the meeting. There's no excuse for it. No excuse for it. And so I refuse to vote on anything in the future that's given to me on the same day that we're voting on it. I also have huge concerns about the fact that prior to today, both the city manager and our mayor have understated, I think, the involvement of the city with this project. We have purchased property adjacent to this project. We now see before us a partnership with the CHP. This didn't happen today. This has been, we didn't just start writing this grant today if it's due Friday. So why are we just hearing about it today, and why have we been told time after time again that the city has no part in this? We're not naive. The city has a part in this. But unfortunately, most of us don't know anything about it. Next point is we have this great opportunity to ask the State Parks Department for a grant Why aren't we asking this to save the Carnegie Center? Why aren't we asking for grants to other parks facilities that we have? We can't take care of those. Why are we seeking a grant for some new project that we just heard about today? We don't even know what the stability of the CHP is. The CHP doesn't even know. They don't know what the future is. They don't know where they're going. They don't know if they're going to open their doors tomorrow for all the other museums that we have in the city. And we're going to partner in building something new. It is unbelievable. Mr. Fowler last night, sits on the board, was very specific last night at the meeting that the Falls Access Project is not your priority at the CHP. And you spent numerous times last night saying our priority number one for the CHP is opening the museums. That's what you said. And here today, we're being asked to support this. And highlighted, it says, whereas the City of Oregon City, Clackamas Heritage Partners, Clackamas County, and numerous community partners and stakeholders have identified improvements known as the Willamette Falls Access Project as a high priority need in Oregon City. Well, let me tell you something. This is the high priority needs that we have. Open the museums that we currently have in this city. That's the priority. What's another priority? Open the Carnegie Center. What's another priority? Help the Ermitinger House. What's another priority? Hire police. The Falls Access Project is not a high priority in this city. And we can't even finish our goals. As a commission, we have met numerous times to meet our goals. How can we make decisions about our goals, and how can we claim that it's a high priority when we don't even know what our priorities are? I'm not done yet. There's another thing here that bothers me. This project, and I even stated this to you, Craig, last night. I truly believe if the CHP would have came to the city or to the citizens a couple of years ago when they started this investigation, the Falls Project, and said, well, I don't know. Was it a year ago? I don't know when. I honestly don't know when it started. So I'll take the timeline back. Whenever it started. Why? I get the feeling that this process is kind of starting like the process of the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center opening. When the Interpretive Center opened, it made one crucial mistake way back when, and that was it never got the buy-in from the city. It never got the buy-in from the citizens. We took a park, we built an interpretive center, which could have been the number one focal point in this state for a tourist attraction. But we didn't have the buy-in of the citizens. We just didn't. And it never was as successful as we all dreamed. And it had huge potential. It had as much potential as this project does. It really did. This Willamette Falls project has huge potential, but why didn't we start from the beginning and say, look at this. We see that the CHP has having some problems operating its facilities. And in 2 years from now, we may be bankrupt. Or in 1 year from now, we may be. This is our vision. This is what we want to do. We think this access project could support all these sites. We think it really can. I think that's your position. But why wasn't that brought out right from the beginning? I have been involved in this city with the Tourism Council. I've been on the Oregon City Heritage Committee. I've been on the TAPS Committee. I'm about as involved in the heritage sites in the city as anyone. And I didn't know about this tram project until this year, or until even just recently. It has been hidden, and the buy-in is just not there. I think we would all support it, if that buy-in was there, but you're losing some crucial help by keeping it hidden and just now bringing it out, right 2 days before the deadline for the grant. It has so much potential. It really does. And so does the CHP, but I cannot support this until we fix CHP. And I cannot support anything or any cent until that's done. And I apologize for that, because I want more than anything. We have such potential in this city, and someday before I die, hopefully, we will see it.
Commissioner West.
Rocky, thanks. It was good to hear what was on your mind, and I share also many of your sentiments in the fact that I had my concerns that we just got this today, but am I understanding that this grant applications due this Friday? Okay, so many times throughout commission we have emergency things on an agenda because of a deadline. So I can understand that, so fine. Well, the other thing is I think this is what my analogy will be for my reasoning on this. I'm understanding from today that there's zero money going towards this grant from the City of Oregon City, that the money is coming. We were asking for a grant, and the county has pledged, and they're raising private funds for the other match. I would liken this to how when my children wanted to go to college, and we went through all this process of applications, dreaming big from every expensive college in the state, because you really don't know what you can get. And I didn't want to say no because sometimes possibilities happen. And we'll figure we're going to cross that bridge too if we get accepted, and then we figure out the financing. So that's how I'm thinking through that one. And the strong language in the grant, Rocky, of our city priority, I don't consider this. This is not our city commission goals where it's listed on priorities there. I am taking as strong language for a resolution to back the wording of a grant. So they just want this as strong as possible. This does not say that our city commission goals are, to build this falls access process. And then I will concur with both of you that because I don't want to slow up the process, just like in the college application thing, you apply for it, and we'll see down the road where it goes, but I know there's a conversation yet on how we're going to reopen our museums. That conversation will have taken place, and hopefully a solution will be identified, or this will not happen. And that we will also have to have public process down the road. If we get this grant, and this looks like it's a possibility, we will need to have a public process. So for tonight, I think I can support it.
Commissioner Neely.
Commissioner Smith.
Well, I had my hand up.
You did? I
Yes.
didn't see it.
Yes, no, I did have my hand up.
I didn't see it, sorry.
First of all, I strongly agree with the emotional sentiments that Commissioner Smith expressed. I generally try to hold my emotions in check a little bit, but I'm going to say something after this motion passes that is not directly connected to this grant. A point that I'd like to make is, first of all, the Urban Renewal Agency did vote for the procurement of those properties, and that was a public process. I think there was some notion that an access that might include a tram may occur, but the actual specific future of it wasn't identified. The properties became available, and we simply took advantage of that particular fact. I don't think it was the view that we had as a city, a specific view on how those properties were going to be used. So there was a public process that went there. I've heard rumors to the effect, too, that the manager and then the city and our mayor knew things that we didn't know at a certain point in time. They can address that if they wish. But the point is, I mentioned specifically the benefits of Phase 1 and Phase 2. I'm not at all sure I'd support the tram project simply because it would be so terribly expensive. And a failure, if in fact that did not have the tourism draw that we would hope to have, I think would probably speak very badly about us. But this specific request ties in so greatly to the Urban Renewal Agency identification of a project that almost came from the early beginning, and that is the fixing of the WPA constructed walls along the promenade. This tie-in and to be able to extend that tie-in to the Museum of the Oregon Territory is, I think, a tremendous possibility. If there were a way to do it, what I'd like to integrate into that, frankly, is taking that awful pedestrian bridge that we've got that crosses off to the promenade across McLaughlin. Even if we took some of the structure of that and actually moved it to the Museum of the Oregon Territory or to the end of the trail, where you could get the trail experience, go directly across then to get a good look at the falls. I have the same issue with you in terms of having things presented at the last minute, but I do recognize a deadline on the grant. It's just that I see this as a very good dovetail to things that we have in fact been working on for such a long period of time that I'm going to support it. I'm going to make some comments that I think will probably become emotional on my own part after this motion is passed, but in terms of these two phases, I do think it's consistent with the visions that the city has talked about before.
If I could go first. Thank you. I agree with you, Commissioner Smith, in almost all of those of your points. And in fact, well, Commissioner Neely and I were both invited to the Jones & Jones presentation that Clackamas Heritage Partners had.
And that was prior to the sitting of this commission. That is, this occurred while Commissioner Mabee was the representative to the Clackamas Heritage Council.
Right, but you were in attendance at the same meeting I was.
Yeah. Yes.
And at that point, all those in attendance, I think, will recall that I said, this is not on the city radar. This is not a city priority. You must come and make a presentation to the city council. And then if all of you will recall that at the goal-setting session, I said that you know, we haven't been asked to, but we have not master planned that area around the end of the falls where you live and that section south of the community, because it hasn't been, again, it hasn't risen to the level of a city priority. I also, I did not know the details of this grant application till today either. And I understand that, you know, opportunity sometimes does have to be grabbed when it's there. I've thought, I like you, want the museums to succeed. It's how we define ourselves as a community. And I've been involved probably longer than you, since I'm older, in the heritage community as well, in various aspects of it. And the question actually that I had immediately was, does this inhibit us from working on any other park projects? I called the city manager this afternoon when I read this. So I have exactly the same questions that you do. However, I think, I guess, and again, the questions that I have asked, and I guess I want more reassurance too, is that are we adequately protected in the future, and can we have a full accounting if we allow this to go? So what I hear, just to reiterate, is that this just authorizes the grant to be submitted. We then have an opportunity down the road, which you suggested might be midsummer, to actually approve any funding that might occur. That's how it works? And then beyond that, well, then there's a ton of interaction that CHP needs to have with the community and with us to make any of those changes. I mean, vacating Tumwater would require public hearing and parking reconfiguration, because that's all on public property. So I think knowing that all of those hurdles still have to be jumped through, and that this is an opportunity, and I've argued since my first day here that I don't like to see all the paper on the table, but I also understand that now and then opportunity may not knock twice. So I guess with that, I can support this, knowing that we have some other opportunities down the road to check back in and make sure that the accountability and the feasibility and the opportunities the project does represent what the community wants. Because I think at this point, Commissioner Smith is exactly right. We don't know that. Commissioner Nocita.
I'd like to address a question to Mr. Archer about the timing and the genesis of this proposal. Because the email we were forwarded this afternoon seems to have originated from you.
I'm not sure.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that the question?
How did this all come about?
Well, I've been working with David Porter, the executive director of CHP, and frankly, this was discussed as a potential application, but it wasn't certain until very, very recently that the CHP wanted to go forward and had the wherewithal to put this application together. And that decision really was only made probably within the last week or so to go ahead and proceed with this. It had been discussed as a potential application, knowing that because it's a local government grant, that the city would have to be the applicant, and as it's been explained, that we would be the partner in that respect, but not a funding partner, but the applicant. But that all I can't maybe.
With that, I would turn
maybe
to
the two
our
board members could explain
directors and
yeah,
talk about the
because
genesis
our
of the
part of it has
proposal.
been that if we need to be the applicant, we would have to bring this to the commission at some point for your permission to apply, which is exactly why we're here tonight. I do also reiterate, as Mr. Patterson said, I also apologize for the lateness of this. That was not an intention, and nor I don't think it was the intention of the CHP group. It just happened this way with the timing. It's unfortunate, and I do understand your feelings of feeling a little blindsided about this, but I can't speak to the organizational issues of CHP. I think some of this timing had to do with what's going on there in terms of them for sure coming forward with the application. So I'll let Dan and Craig speak to that part of it.
Yeah, and I too apologize for the timing. There's been a lot going on with us, but to try to specifically answer your question, Commissioner Nocita, is we were aware of the possibility of this funding source as a grant. CHP, Clackamas Heritage Partners, met with the director of State Parks, Tim Woods, to just assess the likelihood of the grant at the site. This was in, I don't have the exact dates, I'm sorry, but it was in, I'm going to say mid-January, towards the end of January. He liked the concept of of what we were proposing as a first phase. We shared some of the pieces of the complete, or as we knew it, the Falls Access piece to them. He suggested that we have a second follow-up meeting with some of his staff. And we did invite Scott Archer to that meeting, as well as Dan Zinser from the county. And again, we were trying to assess, were there any competing projects that the city or county had, because we didn't want to get in the way of those projects. Because we needed a local government application person for us. We can't apply. The way the ground rules are set, it has to be a local government. So there was a discussion between the city and the county who would be the lead agency for us if it were to move forward. And it was thought at the time that it would be the city. The county had an application in, and we didn't want to directly compete, so the Parks Director, Dan Zinser, thought it would be best that he assist and had full cooperation in this, but would assist and be not the applicant.
Just out of curiosity, given how last night's session turned into being mostly about fundraising, why wasn't this brought forth and discussed last night?
As I stated last night, And I am taken back by your characterization of last night, because there was not a purposeful deflection of my answering of any question. I thought I made it clear that the Falls access piece, and I do want to talk about the timing, because I think there needs to be a further understanding of the timing of that, because there is not an attempt to keep anybody in the dark or anybody in secret about it. And we're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes we want to have our act together before we present certain things, and yet it's hard to get that information to present it. There's been a lot of starts and stops on all these grandiose ideas at the Falls for years, and none of them have succeeded. And so we took a serious approach as a board, saying we weren't going to get out in front of some legitimate economic studies, some legitimate ideas on design. Not that we were trying to keep it all into ourselves, but we wanted to have some reasonableness to those ideas in order to come forth with that. We just received those in the first part of December. 2 of you weren't even commissioners yet. We had 3 new county commissioners. There was not an effort on our part to hide this in secret or to not tell anyone. Now, then we had the rest of December was tied up with a little bit of snow. We shut down in January, the museums. February came and we were dealing with a pretty large funding issue. I'm not trying to justify the lack of communication, because I do believe there could have been more, and I apologize for that, and I really mean that. But we are anxious to sit down with you and go into detail about this. It is necessary, and we want that. But there's been no secrecy. It's been in the paper. It's been in the newspaper several times. There isn't that. But that doesn't mean we've done everything right in our process. But back to the timing of this grant, we knew there was an application deadline coming of Friday or April 1st, or really close here, and we just decided we have to. And to your point, Rocky or Commissioner Smith, we realized the main need. You're right. Is the immediate need is the opening of the museums. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, we don't want to stop the longer term approach. So there's a real fine line we do walk in that, and I realize that, because we've worked very hard. We spent 2 years just negotiating the legal agreement to have the right to access the falls. 2 years. And that was the first thing that we wanted to do, because without that, we couldn't even move forward. We couldn't even begin to talk about it. So there's been, and we can go into detail about all the things we've done up to this point of really wanting to then engage the public more. All the decisions aren't made. These are just some really beginning draft ideas, and yet we know there's enough certainty over the trail systems. And to your question about why can't we do these grants for other parts of the Carnegie Center or other things, there's some strict criteria for these grants, and this first phase, as you mentioned, ties in, because trail systems is really a big part of this. And the way this is, it does connect to the promenade, and also then begins to connect even south, possibly towards the Kanema Cemetery, and tying into the Metro thing. So our timing has been really, in working on this, in the last couple of weeks, really hard and heavy to meet this deadline, because quite frankly, we have, I believe, strong support at the state. I believe that we can be successful in this grant application. So, kind of rambling, but I hope I've answered it a little bit. But
and I concur with what Dan said. We're trying not to hide anything. It took quite a bit of time to get the memo of understanding with PGE, to get potential access, and we looked at this as connecting North and South Oregon
Will
City.
you provide that MOU to us?
Yes, and if the city requests it.
Yeah. Commissioner Smith.
I respect your comment about us being new commissioners, but I am on every heritage committee in this city, honestly, and I didn't start hearing about the tram project with no more than a year ago. I made the comment that this has been a process for 2 years, and you kind of chuckled, and then you reinstated that it has been in process for 2 years. Hold on. I'm not going to spend much more time on this because my opinion and what I stated before doesn't change. I have a couple other concerns that I'm going to add to that. Our mayor just stated again that the city has not really been a part of this, but yet, at least in the last couple of weeks, there's been collaboration on this grant, which we haven't heard anything or any heads up. So the questions that we asked tonight could have easily been asked a week ago, like what was the criteria for this grant? Because that would have solved the Carnegie and all these other questions. So it wasn't like this is just a tonight thing. We knew about this a couple weeks ago. There was a partnership with the city. This has been worked on. And yet we don't know anything about it at all. And even when we get it presented, we're missing all the crucial pieces. I also want to make a comment that to Doug respectfully, though, but I don't appreciate assumptions being made that motions are going to be passed when we haven't even voted on them.
I didn't say that.
You did. You said
No.
when this motion passes,
I'm sorry.
and I don't appreciate that.
I'm sorry.
I also want to make a comment that there is a perceived, or more than a perceived, conflict of interest with the mayor's husband sitting on the board, and I have concerns about that. And so I want to, you can address that, but that bothers me in a situation where we're creating a partnership with an entity within the city. So I just wanted to state that.
Yes, Commissioner West.
I guess the one thing I forgot to say that I was concerned about is, does this project preclude us from applying for any other park grants, or is it because we can apply for this because we aren't putting up the match, versus if we applied for a grant for one of our other trails projects, I'm guessing we don't have any money to, city money for a match. So I just want to make sure of that, because that does matter to me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that, Commissioner West. We, in the local government grant program, there are two categories, and this is the bigger money category. There are grant categories under $50,000 also, which is actually how we funded a portion of our spray park and tennis court rehab at Rivercrest Park a couple years ago. At any rate, in each of those categories, you can only have one grant per cycle for an agency. So the long answer to your question, shortened, is yes, that's correct. It does preclude us from receiving any other funding during this grant cycle, which is at the current time we didn't anticipate placing any applications forward, because I think what you were getting at, Commissioner, was we've spent down all of our SDCs, which would be our match on any other programs.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years, we've had some of the most aggressive growth and acquisition in our parks with all the projects that we've done, numerous projects, and then two major acquisitions that have happened. We basically have spent down our parks development fund, and over the next year or two, as we anticipate hopefully growing that back again, if we start selling more houses and collecting our SDCs again, then we will be in a position financially to go after those grants and match the money that we need to do. So frankly, we didn't have an anticipated application for this fund. So Yeah, John Storm Park was funded through this program. We just closed that out as we finished that project last year, which opened us up to being eligible to applying for this or any other grant that we would choose to do. So we don't have any other grants that we had anticipated applying for in this program.
Thank you. Commissioner Casino, I'm going to answer. Sure. I'd just like to address your question about my husband serving on the board of Clackamas Heritage Partners. That it is not a direct conflict of interest at all, because neither he nor any of his family members stand to benefit in any way from that, and so therefore it's not a conflict of interest. It's do I pump him at night? Oh yeah, I'd like to hear what happens at the board meeting. Sometimes he chooses not to tell me, and sometimes he does. Do I give him information about my way of thinking? Yes, I do. I think that happens in families, but there's a common knowledge in the community. I do not hide it, and we've talked about whether it's appropriate for him to serve. He wants very badly to do it, so I try to keep the separation. I've never put myself as the liaison to CHP because of that. So I've tried to keep the firewall, but yeah, we talk. We're a married couple, so. But I hope I've answered that. Commissioner Nocita.
One last comment from me. I just want to say that I didn't find Commissioner Smith's discussion emotional. If it was, I'll add my own emotional statement here. And just want to give a forthright feeling, also as a new commissioner, about the irony I feel in this resolution being described as an application for a Phase 1 and Phase 2. The irony being, of course, with the same thing going on with the Cove project, which I find is also, I have a concern about a perception I have that we're kind of like going through this process of incrementally getting the taxpayers, on the hook for stuff that will really come due in perhaps a not very positive way down the road. This administration is going to last for another 2 years, year and a half, but the access permit is being kicked out beyond the current administration, and if something does go south, it's the two of us who will be here for 3 and 4 years who are going to catch hell if it does go south. And I just would like my fellow commissioners to please take that into account when you make these votes, because we're here to serve. We're putting our necks out there too, and I think there are things like this going on, which the bill may come due, and I'm going to have to face the wrath if things go south. So that's my emotional appeal.
Commissioner Neely.
Well, I'm going to make a motion. However, the third whereas, I'm going to have it changed in my motion. The second sentence, it says, and stakeholders have identified Phase 1 and Phase 2 improvements of what is known as the Willamette Falls Access Project. Otherwise, I don't think I would be able to support the resolution, because the Willamette Falls Access Project has things in it that I don't feel I could support at this point. So I'll state, I move forward the resolution authorizing the Department of Community Services to apply for local government grant from the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for development improvements known as the Willamette Falls Access Project, and delegating the authority to the Director of Community Services to sign the application, with a modification in the third whereas to insert before, after identified, and before improvements, Phase 1 and Phase 2, and after improvements of what is known. And if the attorney would read it and say, and I'll ask him if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my motion.
May I read that sentence so that it flows? See if I captured it.
Mhm.
Whereas the City of Oregon City, Clackamas Heritage Partners, Clackamas County, and numerous community partners and stakeholders have identified Phase 1 and Phase 2 improvements of what is known as the Willamette Falls Access Project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. Is there, actually, we do have discussion. If you could move one of you, at least. Sorry, I almost forgot you. Then I saw the card, which is...
about to let that happen.
I figured you'd probably raise your hand. Wait.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, before I came to speak to you as a citizen, now I'm going to speak to you as the chair of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. Actually, the co-chair, but since I don't have a co, I'm acting as the chair of the Neighborhood Association, of which 3 commissioners are members of that neighborhood association. 4?
4. Yeah, I'm the only one who is not.
All right.
You were Rocky?
Yes.
Where do you live?
Yeah, that's
Meet your neighbor.
That's true.
Really
Four.
well.
Four
Yes,
we are.
everyone knows where I live. I live up at Old High School.
She doesn't know. She doesn't know.
I didn't know you lived there. I thought you lived out in Glen Oak.
Well, that aside.
I hope that's
I
not
knew,
off my time.
I knew where his house was because I saw all those vote for Rocky Smith for city commissioner signs in front of his property.
There was only one in my
Okay.
If I may continue.
Let's allow Mr. Gifford to continue.
Thank you very much. I have 3 points to make. Number one is, although I am not emotionally outraged at this prospect, I am seriously disappointed. Disappointed that the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association was not consulted or presented these plans in any phase, at any time, or asked to be a partner. We have a very active neighborhood association, a very strong group, and very interested in our backyard in which this project would take place. And I'm disappointed that we were not approached in any fashion. Secondly, Commissioner Smith, I certainly agree with many of the points that you made. However, I believe that there was one serious error. You mentioned that when the interpretive center was developed, that there was one major error of not bringing the city on board. I think that there were actually 2. And the second major error was that there was not a plan for maintenance. There was not a plan for what happens when the bonnets rip off. There was not a plan. There was not money set aside for what do you do to take care of something. And I would certainly want to make certain that if there is any development being made in so far as a tram or a sky viewpoint of any sort, that there be money planned for how are you going to maintain this, how is it going to be kept up so that it does not become a burden on future generations. Thirdly, with those being said, my understanding of what you're being asked to consider tonight, because of the timing and because of the lack of true obligation by the city for any funds, at this point, that could be months before the city is actually required to make a decision to join in or not, I would certainly encourage you to go ahead and pass this anyway, just because of the timing on it. With everything else aside, it is an opportunity knocking. And I don't think we ought to cut off our nose to spite our face. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Yes, Paul.
Probably about 18.
Probably need to
Paul
reintroduce,
Edgar,
sorry.
Land Use Chair, Kenema Neighborhood Association. I was invited to one of the meetings about 18 months ago, and at that time, I don't remember if it was Heritage Partners or what it was, but there were discussions about the Oregon Department of University of Oregon coming in and doing their survey work and trying to identify it. And because of the connection, the potential connection to Kenema and to potential trail connections of which I'm concerned of and I believe are correct and should go through and connect out through Kenema, I wanted to find out what was happening. I did ask a point-blank question to David Porter in an email asking him about the Skyway Tram project, and at that point, it was buried. It was, no one said, and yet it was full bore, and it goes back to the purchasing of the 2 houses on 2nd and Tumwater. They were not purchased for any other reason but for this project a long time ago. And any innuendo is disingenuous about it not being connected. I feel that's wrong. And for us to continue on in a disingenuous mode is wrong. It's not fair to the public. My neighborhood really doesn't understand. McLaughlin doesn't understand. I talked to the new homeowner that's building a house directly above this, and he said, Paul, they're even talking about trying to squeeze out my neighbor, the VFW, trying to get him out of there. We have so many issues about how do you close off or vacate a street. You got a VFW there, and they've got leases, and they're in business. This is like getting the horse before the cart. You know, this, I don't know, whatever you're trying to do, this is wrong. We have, there's houses there. People have got legal rights. And we're moving ahead on something like this in a tram. My God, if we learned anything from OHSU, can we, the citizens of Oregon City, get ourselves caught up or trapped into something that is not fully thought out and agreed to in every way, shape, and form? This precursor, this incremental step, like Jim said, this is a step that's absolutely wrong. If it's not been aired in the public correctly, where we all have an opportunity to fully understand what it is, we need to see that business plan.
Okay. Please summarize, Paul.
Okay? We don't even have basic 101 in marketing done in the whole CHP entity. We probably need a new executive director that would be not a PR person, but an operational management person. Until we get those things done, we're in trouble.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak before we vote? Seeing none, Nancy, please poll the commission.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Nasita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Yes.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 3-2.
Okay, now I've got another comment.
Yes, Commissioner Neely, you got some more comments.
Yeah.
Yes,
You
please
should.
come back.
I do. I haven't reviewed it, but I'm almost certain the Clackamas Heritage Partners are in violation of our management contract for the management of the End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. You did not come before us to tell us you were going to close it down. You should have done that. I will ask the attorney to review the management contract because I do believe you're in violation of it. And the only person that's actually talked to me about this issue from the Clackamas Heritage Partners is Joyce Cohen. Nobody else has talked to me. You indicated you'd like to get together with me. But that beside the point. I think you've done a disservice to the city in terms of how you've handled this whole issue with the interpretive center, because you have a management contract with us.
Commissioner Nasita, then we'll allow you to respond.
And my mic was off. Not intentionally.
No, I don't know if it mattered. Commissioner Nasita, please.
While the microphones are on, I would like to see if I can get some disclosure from our gentleman here regarding the VFW hall, because I've heard a rumor that the lease has been terminated and the VFW is going to be kicked out. And this map that's going around shows the VFW hall not there anymore. What are your intentions regarding the VFW hall, for the record?
Well, we have no absolute connection with the VFW in the lease whatsoever. My intention would be that as long as they want to stay there, they should stay there. I think there's some discussions that have to be made in terms of driveway access. We may want to talk to them about, can we work together in terms of maybe the building, but it's a historic Quonset hut building. I think it's my position they should be there as long as they want to be there. If they ever desired to move, then I think if we were an initiator of that desire because of activity or public activity, then I think it's incumbent upon us, CHP, to help that. But it's not my intention that they should have to, nor would we want to push them to move. And I don't know about the lease. I've never heard that rumor, but we don't have.
I haven't either.
I have heard, but I don't know that it's true, that the VFW owns their own building and property. That's what one of the discussions came up, but I do not know that for a fact.
Okay.
You want to clear that up?
I know the city owns the
Yeah.
parking lot, but I don't know
We own
anything
the
about
park, yeah,
Yeah.
they talked to him last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the rumors that get started in Oregon
Yeah.
City, and, frankly, I think folks probably need to check what the facts are before they state those things, but I guess that's not in the cards. The only thing that I know, we had a discussion last year with VFW to try to sign an agreement in regards to parking. It was an attempt to cover our liabilities as well as VFW's. And we put together an agreement that, and they had some issues, and we said, we'll try to work with you, and we worked best we could. But in the end, they basically said they didn't want to sign it because I think, frankly, part of it is they don't really understand if anything happens out there. I think the way it is right now, what we're trying to do is dissolve ourselves of liability if something happened at a VFW event that was on our parking lot. They refuse to sign it because they don't really have the insurance. I don't know how they cover themselves if that in that situation. As it is, they can continue to park there. We haven't closed off. Have no intention to do that. But I think they're kind of strung out there. And I think they did state at that meeting, best I recall, that they own that building. I don't know really what the ownership of that building is. I will say, as you look at this issue, you might want to think about it, because I don't know how you send a resolution to the Parks Board saying we support this project 100% by a vote of 3-2. I don't think that's going to be a very strong application for this project.
That's what they got.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what they got.
It's the best we can do.
Yeah. Commissioner Nocita and then Commissioner West.
I would like to make a motion in response to what Mr. Danielson said. I would like make a motion that the City Commission request of Clackamas Heritage Partners the MOU with PGE regarding the project and all engineering and feasibility studies regarding the Skyway project, and make them public.
Second?
For discussion, I'm wondering if it would be possible that the bulk of materials could come in a work session setting,
That's what I wanted
so
to
that
get at.
we can hear about it, know the context of those. I'm not saying I agree, but I'd like to see that in context of the project, because we haven't had the. I'm sure you're.
We
I'm
wanna do
sure you
that.
now understand that you
Absolutely.
need to give us a full-blown
Absolutely.
discussion.
Yeah.
So, any other
The only
discussion?
thing I would say about
to the motion?
that, and I want to honor the right and becoming a board member of the group, if you still want to.
If
and
you
honor all
invite me
that.
to your meetings, I'll come to
Yeah.
your meetings.
Well,
you haven't yet.
Yeah. Well.
I thought you were our representative.
You are a representative.
I don't get notice of their meetings.
That's
I think
that's an issue we can
that
work
needs
on.
to be communicated to us officially that you are the representative of this city. I think.
Oh, I
would-
think I did, but.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we just.
No, well, that's
I
a
think-
different issue.
I think I don't want to get into that,
No.
but that needs to happen. But
Right.
the only thing that I want to look at in that agreement is if there are any clauses at this stage that we're bound by in terms of disclosure of it. I don't. I'd have to look at that again.
Well, my motion is to make the request, and it has
Sure.
been seconded, and I move the question.
Can you just call the question so we don't have to vote on the question? If you could just call it, I'll go to it, but we have to vote on closing debate, and I don't want to go through that. So if you could just call the question, please?
I thought I just did.
No,
Move the
you
que- I'll
moved
call
it.
the question.
Thank you. Okay. Now, that allows us to allows the discretion of the chair to go to a vote rather than voting on that. So, are you all comfortable with moving on? Okay. Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner West,
When do I get to discuss things about this? I wanted to say something. Did I miss it?
You don't get to now.
Okay. Well,
That's Alice's fault.
sorry, I don't know all my Robert's Rules of Order and Procedure here, I guess. I was hoping, and I was going to announce it, that the next meeting is for the CHP is April 8th, and that somewhere between here and there, that we would get this on a city a work session. So, do we need to have an MOU? What did you say? What do you want?
Would you review the documents that you mentioned before?
The memorandum of understanding between Clackamas Heritage Partner and PGE
PGE.
regarding the Skyway project.
Well, do we need to, I would like to
Or the
see all
Willamette
these at a
Falls
work
Access.
session. Do I need to see him, have them on my desk tomorrow morning?
No, I don't think there was no time limit in his motion.
Okay, yes.
And Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita,
Aye.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Okay, any other comments then, for the good of the order on CHP? Good luck in getting those museums
Thank you.
open by May 1.
Can I apologize again? We did a
Yes.
very poor job of communicating. And so, yeah. So I'm on the record.
Right. Well, we'll look forward to better communications as
Yes.
we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're still on the city manager's report.
One final item.
It's a long report.
It's been a long report, and I haven't talked much.
That's right. That's unusual.
One thing, and we can talk about this at your work session if you wish, because basically I'm seeking a little direction, is I think staff will tell you that I cringe every time someone mentions to me that they need a walk-on agenda item, because there's nothing I hate more than bringing something to you. However, and I'll be glad to do that. It's easy for me to work backwards from when a decision needs to be made. But in terms of the action of you making the decision, I want you to understand that that then puts it sometimes into my jurisdiction to make a decision whether we're going to do it or not, because I take it off your plate to make that decision. So
I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
if there is
Let's
a
talk about walk-on
timeline
items.
in which something has to be submitted, and it needs to be walked on to get that before you to make a decision, and I say no, then I've made that decision for you. And that is my reluctance, and that's why I bring it to you. But to get harangued for that every time it happens is, it's easy for me to make those decisions. So I'm looking for direction from you whether you want all items not to ever be brought to you on that, on a time frame for that, and I'll be glad to do that, but I want you to understand the implications of that decision. Not something you have to talk about tonight, but it's something I think you need to consider, and let me know where you want me to go with it. I'm happy to work either way, but I don't want to be criticized for not bringing something to you that you wanted to make a decision. And tonight I understand there's a motion around this, but many times it's going to be an issue that you might have wanted me to bring forward, but a dictum such as that makes a decision for all things. So, with that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move into Commissioner Communications. I have I think, interesting, did you pass those out? This to Jim? Yes. Yeah, you got it, okay, great. MPAC, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, is heavy, as we all are, into the growth issues. And I don't know if you all had a chance to read the growth forecast that was in the newspaper and the employment forecast, but I passed out to you the document that we discussed at MPAC. And I think it's interesting to look at. So hopefully we'll have a chance to kind of go in depth with it when Dan Darntlaw leads us through the local aspiration stuff. But on the first page, when we talk about the overview of what the growth is, the questions we had, so we're always supposed to have a 20-year land supply. So does that mean we have an infinite capacity? Are we always moving our urban growth boundary? When does that end? And one of the answers was, yes, we do have infinite capacity if we choose to go up, because we're not as dense as Hong Kong. And but that's one of the interesting questions. Do we grow out? Do we grow up? how much density do we have, and what's our capacity to serve it? And then we talked about taxpayer density. How much density do you have to pay for the infrastructure? How much income and how much tax burden can we tolerate in the region? Another interesting thing, I think, Metro has usually in their forecast before has always used a point forecast, and this is now a range forecast. So it talks about the growth, the highest possible estimate and the lowest possible estimate. And of course, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But it helps us to plan for a range, and that's, I think most people around the table thought that was really an improvement. When you look at page 5, the population forecast is pretty straight up. Those are the people that we're expecting in the next 20 years. By 2030, the population could be 2.9 to 3.2 million. And by 2060, the population this is in the 7-county area, could be 3.6 to 4.4 million people. That's the range. So again, the decisions that we'll be making around the regional and local tables, do you plan for the upper end of the range, or do you plan for the lower end of the range? And then what are the variables in between? And I think the other interesting thing, on page 7, you'll see the household forecast. And you'll see that the size of the average household is definitely going down. And it says the region's population is forecast to be distributed fairly evenly among different age groups. That's a trend in the entire United States as well, even though we know that the baby boomers are the largest retirement group to come, and I think it's as yet uncertain what the requirements of the boomers are in their retirement years. So that's important. I think the next important page is to look on page 9, and that's the employment forecast by sector. And you'll see that as predicted, the highest range is in the information, finance, professional, business category, and those are actually high-paying jobs. But you'll look at the next ones, health and education and government, and those are both, they provide less revenue. They're well-paying jobs, but they don't provide the revenue that the information, the financial sector does back to the community. So that's an implication for the future, and that actually supports what our city manager has been saying. Where is the support for local government to come in the future? So when you, let's see, I think that's essentially the last page is also interesting on page 12 when you look at the historical growth rates, and it's really pretty interesting how much our growth rate has slowed down in the metro region. But this is kind of the guiding document for so many of the decisions that we'll be making around the regional table. Now, the other, I think, thing of interest is Title 13, which is Nature in the Neighborhoods. And we had a report about how we're doing. And just so you know, Oregon City, as we looked at our code revisions, we are a jurisdiction that has set the first half of 2009 as our target date for submittal. And we're along with Fairview, Happy Valley, Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, north half of Portland, Troutdale, Westland, Wilsonville, and Multnomah County. So there is a significant number of communities along with ours who are still working on that. Now, I think the other interesting thing about Title 13, which is designed to protect habitat and natural areas in the region. And so the measure, of course, is how much are we losing? And so the first study has come in after the first 2 years? Just after the first 2 years. So in undeveloped floodplains, the 10-year target is to preserve 90% of undeveloped floodplain. The 2006 to 2008 loss was 262 acres. This is in the 3-county region, or 1.7%. So it's essentially on target. One of the other measurement is habitats of concern, like oak, prairie, bottomland, wetlands, and looking at declining wildlife and plant species. The 10-year target is to preserve 95% of those, and the loss over the 2 years of 2006 to 8 is 180 acres, or 0.7%. So, yes, we're losing some, but overall, we're way under the targets. So I think we're supposed to conclude that what we're doing is working, though, some would say that any loss is difficult. But the codes and the regulations and the incentives that we're putting into place are supposed to do more to protect that over the years. And we've talked together about density bonuses and setback flexibility and all of that stuff with new development standards and habitat-friendly development standards. So that's one of the other things that we're talking about a lot. Just to talk to you a little bit about the issues of growth that, again, are very hot around the table. Why can't we develop down the I-5 corridor? Well, Boone Bridge is one of the constrictions. Why can't we move into the high-quality farmland around Hillsborough? Because that's flat land. It's easy to develop. But if that's where all the jobs go, does everyone from Clackamas County then drive over to Hillsborough to work, which doesn't decrease the carbon footprint, which is another goal for the region? And so these are very, very difficult and sticky issues. Schools are, as you all know, are experiencing a decrease in younger children. So understanding how populations move around the region is important. And then the equity piece, the distribution of wealth and benefits. So is it equitable that Hillsborough and Washington County receives all the high growth assessed value in the jobs and the high-tech jobs, while we over here provide housing, which doesn't give us as much benefit for our assessed value? So again, very, very sticky issues. We're all going to be voting on those over the course of the next little while, but I wanted you to have that little piece of information. So that concludes my report. Are there others that have reports
I've got a
from?
question.
Yes.
Your page 7 there. Was anything talked about in terms of figures 3? They have
Get my thing out here.
This is where you have the average household size forecast, and
Yes.
of course there has been a downward trend there, but that downward trend was flattening, and then they projected all of a sudden becoming steep immediately. Did anybody try to ascertain why that projection was there?
Steep immediately.
Yeah, just drops like that, and that's surely not what's indicated before the present. You've got a flattening out, then they show this tremendous drop immediately in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember the answer to that? We didn't ask that question. I think.
I mean, it doesn't seem what the recent data, the recent information is showing.
I'll make sure I'll make sure I ask that question.
Given the timing, it's
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. No, everybody's going to be unemployed and staying home having more kids.
One wonders. But I think one of the implications of this is that having fewer people in the house doesn't mean that people are going to request smaller square footage. And I think that's, again, one of the dilemmas, what role government might have in that decision, I think. So others that have reports from their committees? Commissioner West.
The hour is late, and I'm tempted to be quite super brief on this. But given the discussions we have had all together here at the dais tonight, I see the importance of sharing information because we don't want to have anything seem to be information in little private things and not accessible to everyone. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been involved with. On the Main Street program, which is one of my favorite things to work on, we're having our Economic Restructuring Committee meeting tomorrow. So many people ask me what's going on with Main Street, and I don't have a whole lot of tangible answers yet because tomorrow is a very exciting day. We're going to meet Mary Bosch from Market Tech, who's doing our market and research analysis. And I don't know if Oregon City has ever had the pleasure of having that done through the years. So this will be really good. Once we have that, then we can target our business mix and continue to grow the downtown. So, and I also wanted to share with who is funding Main Street. Last time I was talking about the ideal funding model, but I just wanted to mention that what the county is into this to support our program. They've given us $10,000 in Upstart money to just get it going, and they are also paying for this Market Tech research, which is $8,000. the Lakota group that we had last week, the state paid for, and the county is providing a lot of training. So they've got $25,000 into our Main Street program this year. Another meeting that we just had, and I believe Rocky attended with us, was our Tourism Action Plan. The grants are due May 5th, and so we...
Oregon City Tourism Council.
Oregon City Tourism Council to work on the Tourism Action Plan. And grants are due May 5th, and our next meeting is on April 27th, where we're going to identify our priorities and funding priorities of the city. So if anybody's interested, please come to that one. And tomorrow night's C4 meeting, and I was going to bring up, maybe all of you have gotten a lot of complaints that the bus routes are being closed out in South End, and I thought this might be a perfect forum to bring that up, and maybe some of our other community partners. I know Happy Valley, when you're in that rural area, that's the ones they're cutting. So I'm hoping to build a little support there for that initiative to keep our bus routes open.
And you know, Commissioner Nocita and I and the Transportation Advisory Committee have written about bus number 153 closure as well.
Yes, I saw that. So just one more way of trying to help do it. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Other reports? Commissioner Nocita.
I have two things to state. First, I'd like to let the public know, since we are in high campaign season right now, that there will be a school board candidates forum hosted by the Holcomb Outlook Community Planning Organization on Wednesday, April 8th, 2009 at 6:30 at the Park Place Elementary School, and that's at 16075 Front Street, Oregon City, Oregon.
What time is that again?
6:30.
6:30 p.m. Actually, that's the only thing I want to pass along.
Okay, thank you.
Could I get a reminder of Budget Committee meeting dates?
April 20, 21, and 28.
Urban renewal likely will be that last day. Okay. Commissioner, yes,
I
yes,
did get
Commissioner.
an email from TriMet today, and there will be another public hearing here at Clackamas County Sheriff's Office Wednesday, April 8th at 4 to 7 p.m. If there's anybody that wants to still participate and provide public input to Metro or to TriMet on the closure of the South End
Which
Road.
building is it again?
It's at the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, Public Safety Training Center, and actually over at Southeast 82nd in Sunnybrook.
Since your mic wasn't on, could you say the date again and the time?
Yes, it's Wednesday, April 8th, 4 to 7 p.m. And right now, TriMet has decided to close the South End Road bus route. So this is our last opportunity to provide additional public comment.
Okay. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Mayor, excuse me,
Oh,
Mayor.
sorry. We are not
You have
adjourned.
2 appointments tonight?
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, thank you. I would like to, and speaking of Budget Committee, that should have triggered it. I have 2 appointments, both for the Budget Committee. One is Chris Geiger, who will serve to the end of 2011, and the second one is William Gifford to the Urban Renewal Budget Committee, who will serve to the end of 2011 as well. So, with that, we are adjourned.